All right, what is going on, everyone, and welcome back to the Mets Weekly Podcast as we are live at this very moment on YouTube and on X for coverage of the 2026 New York Mets spring training. But before we get into all of that, I want to remind everyone to subscribe to the Mets Weekly YouTube channel for new episodes of our show that are recorded live regularly every Friday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time during spring training. For those of you watching or listening on playback, you want to join the conversation in the future, make sure to turn on those post notifications to know when we go live. Make sure to follow Mets Weekly on X and on TikTok. And for our audio listeners, make sure to follow us on all of your favorite listening platforms to not miss the audio version of new episodes that go up at 9 a.m. the following day. Also, make sure to give us a 5-star review. It would be greatly appreciated. So without further ado, let's get into episode number 188 of our show. And out of the three of us, it is just me here. My co-hosts, as of right now, are in Port St. Lucie, watching this going on. As of right now, I will be down there in about I'd say 2 weeks, week and a half to see some stuff like that. However, we do have a very special guest joining the show for the first time. He is a news anchor at SNY and for the New York Post as a host for his own original series, which is titled Straight Outta Flushing, as well as New York Got Game for Knicks Basketball. Please help us welcome the one and only, for the first time, Dexter Henry. Dexter, great to have you on here to talk some Mets baseball, especially with spring games that are kicking off in less than 24 hours in Port St. Lucie. There's plenty to talk about, obviously, but welcome to the show.
Yeah, man, Carson, thanks for having me, man. I want to say shout out to you, 188 episodes, you and the crew doing it. That is a major accomplishment, but thanks for having me, man. Glad to talk some Mets baseball. I can't believe that, man, spring training is here. We're underway, and we'll be talking about the season in a little bit over a month. So, yeah, I'm excited for some Mets baseball to be back.
Yeah, I mean, you say 188 episodes. I mean, it's crazy because we used to record these like offline, and then we started doing them live. We actually did this show. We've been doing it for over 5 years now. So, I mean, it's been a while. So we were doing live shows and things like that. So, yeah, it's been a long time, and we've been with this team for thick and thin, and it's been crazy since even with the new ownership taking over. But either way, there's plenty to get into as to what is going on in spring training. And I think the first way that we can start off is, kind of starting off in the last quadrant of offseason additions that was just made. Even though this is a minor league signing, it is in the caliber of a major league signing. It is someone who was on a major league roster last year, and that being Mike Tauchman, who they just signed to a minor league deal. Now, I want to do a little bit of a rundown here. Over the last 3 years for Tauchman, an above-average hitter, 108, 110, 115 weighted runs created plus last year. Great slash line. We know that he gets on base. That career slash line, I believe, is a typo, unfortunately. However, very disciplined hitter, gets on base, 35 years old, left-handed hitter, of course, former 10th round pick by the Colorado Rockies back in 2013. He's been around for a while. Solid quality of contact, obviously, plus defender throughout his career in left field and in right field. So it will be interesting to see what goes on with Mike Tauchman, and obviously with spring training continuing to elevate in these games. But, I mean, Dexter, I'll point this one right over to you. Obviously, Carson Bench is going to be in this discussion for right field going into spring training. However, there is a little bit of competition to push him. You have MJ Melendez. You have now Mike Tauchman. Brett Beatty has been put into that conversation as well in right field. So, I mean, I think that this is a really, really good addition to kind of pillow the situation where, either way, if Bench doesn't show out, or if he does, I think as of right now, it looks like they have really good backup plans, and they're not just completely giving the keys to Benj and saying, here, kid, win us a World Series.
Yeah, no, I feel exactly the same way. I mean, listen, there's a lot. I'm not saying that you should get excited about Mike Tauchman, but I think, he's a professional, right? And I think that is the most important thing, that he's a professional. I do like the on base percentage with him. That's the thing that I like the most, right? And he's a lefty bat in this lineup. He can get on base. That is good. I also just like the fact that you do not want to just hand the keys or make it easy for Carson Bench. We are all excited about his upside. We are all excited about his talent. I can tell people, and I know you know this too from reading, all the people that are around the team every day, the Mets are very high on Carson Bench. They like his defensive potential. They also like his hitting potential as well too. But you want the kid to be pushed. If he beats out a Mike Tauchman, who's a professional hitter, who can get on base, who could make this major league roster. And if you do, you don't are you excited about him in right field? No. Are you with the other additions the Mets have made to their lineup? I think he's fine and more than serviceable in right field. You'd be more excited if Carson Bench takes the job, but I think you want to see him truly win the job and earn it from a Mike Tauchman. Then, this is no shade to Melendez and even Beatty, who's really playing the position for the first time. Where he feels like it's just sort of handed to him. So I like this move for that. I want to see how Carson Bench responds to it. I do not think that if Carson Bench does not make the team out of camp, I don't think that I wouldn't say that's a failure. Okay. I don't think it's a failure necessarily. I think the way seasons go, he could be back up in the team later in the year. Maybe it's good for him to go down to Syracuse, see what he's got there a little bit more, get a little bit more seasoning and time, and then come back. So I like this. I like this move by the Mets organization. With the moves they made, Soto moving to left, if Tauchman is starting your opening day starting right fielder, it's fine. I wouldn't go crazy over it. If it doesn't work out, do I think the Mets can upgrade that down the road or see if Benj is ready to then come up? Sure. I think it's fine. I think the Mets are in a good position. I think it's fine. Personally, I hope Benj takes the job. So we all have a little bit more excitement about that. But if he doesn't, I don't think it's the end of the world.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you have left field and right field as of right now kind of locked down. Hopefully you can see a healthy Luis Robert, which is what they're hoping as of right now as they're taking it slow. Soto moves over to left field, which was not plausible last year with Brandon Nimmo being here. And then you have right field pretty much put open. And I think right now we know that Tyrone Taylor is going to be on this team, and he's that right-handed bat that comes out of possibly right field of filling that in. He can also play center field and left field as well. But you also get a thought of, well, you have Tyrone Taylor, the right-handed bat, Melendez, Tauchman, Beatty, Benj, all left-handed hitters. So if you're looking at a platoon or if you're looking at trying to balance out the lineup from certain platoons, let's say if you give a day of rest to somebody like Luis Robert, I think as of right now, you have a very good cushion as to, someone's going to perform well. One of those left-handed guys one of those left-handed hitters is going to perform well. And I think that that's the main reason as to why I'm very, very confident in how they choose with, these certain roster situations. I obviously am a little bit more bullish on this situation as to how they're setting up the defense and things like that. I know that a lot of people have questions about it. There's people that are still complaining about it and talking about, well, Polanco at first base, he's never played there before. Bichette at third base, he's never played there before. I mean, you're moving over Juan Soto to left field and already in the first year of the contract, as they also did, I'm pretty sure, with Brandon Nimmo as well. So, I mean, the way that they kind of formed this together, I do think that they've created a lot more of an optimal roster. And that's the main reason as to why I'm very excited to see where it goes, because if there is one piece that ends up failing or ends up not doing well, they do have somewhat of a backup. There's Bo Bichette, who, if he does not play well at third base, You know that Brett Beatty can play third base. You know that there is Ronnie Mauricio, who I believe is the best defensive third baseman on the roster, not even just statistically, but just his overall lateral movement. We all know that he needs to get a little bit healthier, but you also have, at first base as well. We know that they're very high on Ryan Clifford. He's the only guy that was acquired by Billy Epler at that trade deadline who has not been traded yet. And then also Mark Vientos at first base. Maybe they look at Beatty at first base. I don't know. I just feel like there is a lot more optimal things you can do, especially with this defense, that makes this a lot more of a balanced and adjustment type of team that doesn't need to just completely staple themselves to, well, that big first baseman right there and that left fielder that we traded away that is making all this money and we need to get their bats in the lineup. It's a lot more balanced and a lot more optimal.
I think that you, Carson, I thought you made a lot of good points there. I think you were looking at this, in my opinion, very rationally about the team building. But when I was doing shows and talking to other members of the Mets content creation community this year, and now we've got to the point where we kind of know what the roster is going to be like, here in spring training, I'm hearing it among the fan base. There are fans that they want that positional certainty that you're talking about. And I think today, in today's baseball, in 2026, I think positional flexibility is one of the most valuable things you can have on a roster. Now, if you want to say to me, hey, Dex, hey, Carson, I have concerns about how Bichette holds up at third, how Polanco holds up at first, because they haven't had a lot of time with the position. I don't think that that's unfair, but let's see it. Let's see them get the reps. Yeah. Now, at Bo Bichette's presser, I asked David Stearns this specifically. I asked David Stearns, I said, hey, you've signed to Polanco, you've signed to Bichette. How much thought was put into this organizationally about whether or not they could handle these positions? Because, look, I don't think David Stearns is a stupid man. I don't think you think that either, Carson. I think they're doing their homework. I think they're looking at what could be handled. I don't think they were just desperate and throwing darts and seeing what could happen. I think the point you make is such a great one. I'm not worried about Bichette. I want to be very clear about that. I'm not worried about Bichette. I think he'll have moments where he makes a bad throw, where he's learning the angles from third that's different from short. I'm confident that will happen. I don't think it'll be overwhelmingly bad. I'm not worried about him. I probably have a little bit more concern about Polanco, but I think the point you made is the one that people really need to think about through spring training, which is there are options if it doesn't work. And we'll see how the other guys, Beatty, if he gets some grounders at first, he's getting some time. Vientos, there's been long talk about putting him at first and where his best position is, or is it a DH? We will see. There's positional optionality here. And if it doesn't work, if somebody doesn't work, I know Bichette got a good contract, but there are opt-outs there. And Polanco, in baseball terms, you're not paying him that much. I think they're going to be fine, but I just think people shouldn't worry as much because of what you said. The flexibility is there. People just want to know the answers. They want to know I have this guy penciled in, that he's going to be here for this. He's going to do this. But sometimes you don't know. You know who else we don't know about? We have no idea what would have happened in right field, even if Carson Bench gets the job. We have no idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? We don't know how that's going to play out. We hope it works out, but we have no idea. I think what you want to do is put yourself with options. So if somebody goes down, somebody gets hurt, somebody's not ready, you can swap players. I think it's a very good point by you, but I don't think everybody's looking at it like that.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely not. I mean, I have probably argued with way too many Mets fans, either on this show or on Twitter. I try to stay away from it, but sometimes you're just like, oh, well, it's tempting enough. This is a layup. You know what I mean? This is a layup point I can make.
Right.
I mean, it all really just stems from the fact of, the team that they had last year. It continued to fail. They just continued to fail. And at some point, they needed to make a little bit of a change. And I understand it from a point as to someone who has been in the corner of David Stearns. And there has been people that have been very few, and then, some that dive back when they see where he's going. I've kind of been in the corner of David Stearns as to where I know exactly these types of techniques that he showed in Milwaukee that maybe he can do a little bit more with flexibility here. he did this a lot in Milwaukee, where he would have these sure-handed defenders up the middle, Robert, Simeon, Lindor, even if you want to count Alvarez, even though there's some things he needs to work down behind the plate, but he's pretty young. And then he would put athletes in the less taxing range positions. And I think that that's something that I've seen him do a lot in Milwaukee. We saw him do a lot in Milwaukee, and it's paid off fairly well with how great they have been defensively as a team, even after he left Milwaukee and is no longer there. So I think that that's a good way to look at it. Do I agree with it 100%? Was my number one ad 100% be like, well, Pori Polanco's got to play first base? No, it wasn't. However, when you look at him offensively and you look at Bo Bichette offensively, of what they can get combined in comparison to the production that they lost, I think that this is going to be a lot more of a deeper team. And I do think that Steve Cohen believes that. And I do want to get into Steve Cohen's comments. But as for the roster construction, I understand it. I want to see where it goes. But also, like I just said, it's like you have other options as to how you can continue on with that position, and you're not attached to that much. Polanco signed here for 2 years. Bo Bichette, 1 year. Then you also have young guys who you can option down to the minor leagues that are not, if they're not performing. I think that there's plenty ways you can look at it to where you're not tied down to anything. And you probably would have been tied down to something if you were to continue with a group that continued to fail year in and year out. And I think a lot of Mets fans view as, and we talk about this all the time on our show ad nauseum, a lot of Mets fans look at face value of the player and what they are giving you automatically. Sometimes it just doesn't work. Sometimes it just doesn't result in wins. Like, as much as we can talk about that first baseman that went to Baltimore who actually just homered today that people won't shut up about.
He did. And now everybody's like, it's over for the Mets at first.
Yeah, it's done. Yeah, exactly. I can keep this as brief as I can because I've said enough, smart aleck things about it so far. But it comes to a point where even with him, they weren't winning. And they had to somewhat of change it, because I do also think that there was a, leadership issues, not to the point as to where we were seeing with those whole articles that were coming out after the season. But I do believe that the message that was being sent was either inconsistent or it just continued to be something that contributed to them to continue to fall short. And they just needed to make a change as to why, they continue to fail, because you can't continue to fail with a top 1% payroll like they have for these past 5 years and just continue to run the same thing back over and over and over again. You just can't do that unless you're the hockey team that I root for in the New York Rangers, and that's a different story. Don't even get me started with that. Don't even get me started with that.
I will just say this for you, and I am not the biggest hockey fan, but I also do root for the Rangers, and I do some videos from time to time for the Post on it. I don't know how that man still has his job that is running the Rangers. I have no idea. That's all.
There is a man in the chat right now, Matt, and he does a show with his friend Evan. They've been on the show many times because they're also Mets fans.
Yeah.
And we go on there and lament all the time about this whole situation. But it also was a situation that we saw coming like 2 years ago, and everybody was screaming at us when it was happening. But it's, whatever. Not here to talk about the Rangers.
Let me say this to something you said, and it kind of ties with the Rangers. I think one thing that Mets fans should actually be encouraged about with this team under the leadership of Steve Cohen. I know we're going to get to his comments and stuff, Carson. Steve Cohen has shown you that when something doesn't work or a sunk cost is a sunk cost, he is willing to move on from it. And I think that's huge. He's been willing to let the baseball people and David Stearns do what they need to do. Now, it might not be comfortable. It might not be popular among the fan base all the time. Change is not comfortable. We know this all the time, but he will do it. I respect the Mets for sitting there. I didn't love the Diaz stuff, and I'll be the first person to say that, and I've said that publicly. I thought there was no way
one of my favorite Mets ever. I didn't like it either, but
didn't like it.
We move on.
I think it's a bad. I thought it was a bad job, but we got to move on.
Yeah.
The Pete stuff, I personally wasn't as attached as maybe some other people are to that, and I understand why they were attached. But if you take your attachments out of it, you have to look at it and say what you just said. But did they win? Was it working? Have they got anything done? And was it really time to try something better? And if you want to accomplish what Steve Cohen has said he wants to accomplish, which is to have this organization be the sort of Dodgers East, a very sustainable model that can go on for years and, compete for more years and make the playoffs. God forbid, in back-to-back years, those Mets fans
don't ever nice, wouldn't it? Yeah,
that would be nice, right? And so if you want that, you have to start changing some things in the way you're doing, how you're building the team. You just talked about the fact that we've also seen this from David Stearns, more so with the bullpen. And we saw this a lot in 2024. Yes. Hey, if somebody's not performing, yeah, we'll send them down. We'll bring somebody else up that's going to get the job done. This bench player's not good. Yeah, we'll send them down. I like that. I like accountability. I like the fact that, hey, if something's not working, we're not going to stick to doing the same thing. I think fans should embrace that a little bit more. And particularly if you're a Mets fan, I grew up a Mets fan, you haven't seen that much sustained success. Don't you want sustained success? So let's see something different. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But you can't say it was better or worse than trying what you did before. Yeah, try something new. I respect that about Cohen and this leadership right now. And Mets fans know this is very different than when the Wilpons ran the team. Very different. Okay? And I don't think that's a bad thing. That's all I'm saying. I don't think that's a bad thing. So
no, I definitely am someone who is a believer in cause and effect. And even though there are things that happen and people don't like the repercussions of things happening, a lot of it is self-inflicted with this team, where we have seen them continue to fail and fall short as much as they have, and they needed to move on. It wasn't just, well, the individual performance is great, let's completely overpay this, because if you're paying them less salary and then you pay them more, you're not going to be able to maneuver whatsoever. And I understand that Steve Cohen being as wealthy as he is, however, you still need to be smart about it, because the Mets have found themselves in situations where contracts have backed up a situation and has limited them on the roster. One guy that comes to mind, Starling Marte, 4 guaranteed years to him, and they couldn't really maneuver to the DH role the way that they kind of wanted to, and they kind of had to continue with the Winker platoon and things like that, and it ended up being a very expensive situation. You have to spend it, you have to be smart about it, and that's the thing. For me, I'm never someone who goes after AAV as much. I'm always one who goes with the term, because of when you fail, you can pivot from it easily. But there has been plenty of moves that they have made in the past as to why. There's plenty of moves that they've made into the past as to why they had to move on this way, and they had to pivot to this way, in a simple cause and effect. And I think when you go into this entirety of the roster as of right now, people were talking about this the day that David Stearns arrived with, at that current moment, they were paying Max Scherzer and they were paying Justin Verlander, they were paying James McCann, all of this retained salary. And I kept on saying to people, if you didn't want a bargain offseason of Severino, Manaea, and all of these project relievers, if you didn't want a offseason like that, you shouldn't have hired Billy Epler as your GM. Like, that's the cause and effect of what happens and the repercussions of money spent, sunk cost, and things like that. And we have seen the Mets being willing to move on from things such as that, but there's only so much that you can use in order to build an entire roster. And I think even just the way that they are building up depth just in this outfield is extremely impressive, where you have about, I don't know, 4 different options outside of Tyrone Taylor, who is guaranteed to make the opening day roster. And in comparison to when you had, I don't know, 2 outfielders that would be spring invites, and they were guys who were good 7 years ago, and they show you absolutely nothing. And then all of a sudden, one injury, we are seeing guys like, pick your poison, the Janesh Farguses, all these other, the Jake Hagers.
Rough times. Woo.
Yeah, these are rough times. And even when those names that I just mentioned, that was in the Steve Cohen era. So it's, again, it took so long for them to build up what they are building up, and they still are not there yet, because they still have not established that sustainable winning. And when you don't establish that sustainable winning, which has been a focal point to this ownership and this general manager and the entire front office, I mean, you had to make changes. You just had to. There was no way that you could sustain and continue if you went to the heights that the Orioles did for that certain first baseman, or
I love that you won't say his name.
Yeah.
I love that you will not say his name.
I promised my co-host Andrew that we are preferring to him not as his actual name, and we're going to try to say his name as least as possible, because we see it way too much on social media.
Fair enough.
I don't know if Andrew is watching as of right now, but
that's fair.
I mean, we've had our fair share of criticisms. I'm not trying to, hide it behind a wall. Everybody, people in the chat that are watching as of right now, that we have gone in on, a lot of these players, and we are very brutally honest. That's what we do here. It's just one thing. Call him the Cheeto Bear, as they are saying in the chat. That's what we've talked about, like the Orange Bear, because he's in Baltimore. We're trying to figure out
that one. Cheeto Bear.
Yeah, we're trying to figure out names without saying his name, because it just seems like a kind of a toxic environment for Mets fans, and it's a sore subject as of right now, which I get. But as for right now, when it came to the situation, with these certain players, there was nothing that they won for me to say I needed to continue. I saw people arguing about this entire situation of that guy in Baltimore, as we will refer to him. we're checking off the list here.
Yeah.
But as of right now, I mean, we talked about this in the whole situation, and people were talking about how, where the Cardinals let Albert Pujols walk, and there shouldn't be that much of a attachment to, Pete Alonso, and people should be willing to move on. Sorry, I said his name. Whoops. But yeah. Oh, well. There's no punishment as of right now. Maybe we'll think of one. But it's one of those things where, a lot of the argument that I saw today, it was like, well, the Cardinals tried to pursue Pujols, and the Mets didn't even give an offer to Pete Alonso. So that's a completely different thing. Not really, because the Cardinals won. The Cardinals actually won. They were sustainable winners. They wanted to continue. They were coming off of a World Series, I believe, right?
Yep.
2011? 2012?
Or 2012? Was that 2012? 2011.
And I'm not saying it's entirely, his fault or any of these players' fault, but it's collateral damage when you continue to fail as much. Like I said, with cause and effect.
But that's such a great point. This doesn't apply to just sports, like just the sport of baseball, I should say. This applies in all sports. This actually applies in all work, right? Yeah. You want to be mad about the Cheeto Bear leaving? You can do that, right? It's fine. You could do that. Listen, I wasn't thrilled.
My co-host Andrew is going to love you for that, by the way.
Hey, I like the name. I'm rocking with it, man. I'm rocking with it. I like the name, so I'm rocking with it. Right? You want to be mad at it, it's fine. But I think one of the great points you made about cause and effect, Carson, is that, right, what happens from one year does impact the next. What happens from one regime does impact the next. This isn't all just in a vacuum, right? Like, you have to look at this in totality. And if you're really serious, and we are hoping that the Mets are serious about what they're saying and trying to have sustainability. The point of bringing up Albert Pujols is a great one, and by you too, in that the Cardinals made a decision of, okay, we're in St. Louis. We have won with a sustainable model. The Cardinals are one of the organizations, if you look at in baseball in the last 20 to 25 years, they've had a lot of sustained winning. They've done it without a big payroll. There was something impressive about that. I think we would all agree with that. Yeah. Mets fans would kill for the Cardinals last 25 years. You would absolutely do that. But when you make mistakes, even if you can eat those mistakes and you've got Steve Cohen's wallets, it doesn't mean it doesn't hurt you in some impact. It doesn't mean it hurts you in some way or effect in that, right? It's going to hurt some way. There is an effect and there is a step back. And one of the biggest things I have to actually give the front office credit for, I think what we tend to do also in sports and sometimes in life is 2024 was, man, that was a dope season. It was amazing, right? It was like the highs of highs. I don't think most Mets fans would say they thought they were going to be 2 wins away from the World Series. I don't think most Mets fans before the season would have thought that, right? They do that. They get Juan Soto. I get it. Everybody's like, man, we're moving on up. It's going to get better. But it didn't work like that, right? Because they still had holes. They still had things they needed to fill. They still didn't have that really sustainable structure there yet. They could have said, let's invest, let's double down on the Cheeto Bear. Yeah. They could have said that. They didn't do that. They said, look, we got to reinvest. We have guys on the way. We know Ryan Clifford, AJ Ewing. We know there's guys that they're very high on. I'm not saying all those guys are going to work out. I have no idea. I don't know. You don't know. None of us know. No. But you got to get to that point and see. And the future had to start being now. I don't think that's a bad thing. And if you want to change this and you want Stearns and you want Cohen as a pair to be here for a while, then you got to let them build the team in their image, particularly Stearns. You have to let him do that. And his image didn't include Cheeto Bear. No. His image also didn't include Edwin Diaz. And I don't agree with that part. That's the one thing I really didn't like this offseason. But But here's the thing. If the Mets win this year, and I'm saying this to all the Mets fans out there that are listening in the chat, the Mets win enough this year, whatever happens, they get back to the playoffs there, and you see, you are not going to be thinking about the Cheeto Bear. Trust me. No. Trust me, you're not. You will not be thinking about Cheeto. I can't believe I've said Cheeto Bear that much in the last 2 minutes, but you're not going to be thinking about the Cheeto Bear. You will not.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we look back on our show all the time and we're like, how many times did we talk about this? How many times did we say this? So, you know, it's just kind of the effect that we have. But yeah, I mean, Ibby from Till Mets Do Us Part,
shout out to
saying
Ibby.
The
What's
only
up, Ibby?
first baseman I acknowledge is Jorge Polanco. Same here. And I hope that I do hope that he kills it. And like I said, you know, with that whole situation of that infield, before I want to get into, you know, Steve Cohen's comments of what he saw going into his media availability a few days ago, there was a, you know, obviously with those guys playing out of position, but they are also 4 shortstops. So they are athletes who, again, are in those less taxing positions. And I think that there's plenty of, you know, points of emphasis where this team has so many just optimal avenues where they just can plug things in and they don't need to worry about, well, one guy goes down or one guy is here and one guy doesn't hit. The entire lineup can hit. And like we said, there was a lot of times, especially deep into this Steve Cohen era, where if 2 guys didn't perform offensively, the entire team just disappeared completely. Yep. And there had to be an emphasis as to where they actually build a lineup, because you win with a team and not with 2 players or 1 player. Even with some of those points being pointed out, I mean, you can look at those 2 teams that made to the World Series. Ohtani, Betts, Freeman on the Dodgers, they didn't really have to do that much heavy lifting because they had such a team. And obviously they have so many resources and they're towards that top tier of, you know, baseball, and they're the model organization as of right now. But you also look at it offensively, or even defensively with Toronto, who ended up taking them to 7 games, a team that was not very, nobody expected to take the Dodgers to 7 games, but but Toronto did so. You didn't just have a generational postseason run from Vlad Jr., who was phenomenal. I mean, that goes up to his OPS, I'm pretty sure, is like the 3rd highest in a postseason. Amazing. But you also had an incredible performance from guys that just came out of nowhere because of how well that team was coached and how well they were able to maximize those types of players. I mean, who knows if they ever get to that feat again, but you saw guys like Addison Barger step up. You saw guys like Nathan Lucas. Ernie Clement was phenomenal. I mean, great. Insane. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Dalton Varsho, who is one of my favorite two-way center fielders. I mean, you had so many guys who were stepping up the way that they were. And for the Mets, there's been a lot of this situation where it's like, okay, well, Lindor doesn't hit. Oh, well, that's it. That's it. And we're going to see that first test here, like we said, with Lindor possibly going out there for opening day, but he's going to be banged up and there could be a struggle for him. We're going to see what this lineup looks like when it's not we go where Francisco Lindor goes. And I think that it's a good test for this lineup to show how deep it really is. And I do believe that as of right now, 1 through 9, you could get 20 plus home runs from any of these guys. And that's what I think is very, very, what makes me so confident. You know, I don't know about the translation of Carson Benj's power into the major leagues just yet. Maybe if you're plugging him into the opening day lineup, who knows? But I feel confident that this team is going to be an actual team and not just, well, this team is just going to disappear completely if one guy doesn't hit.
I love the point about Lindor too, because and I also think the Mets are going to be cautious with Lindor. This is no reporting by me on this, but like if he's not ready for opening day, I think that'll be fine. Like let's say he's he's 2 weeks out before he comes back in April. I think that's fine. I think it's good. Listen, the other thing I'll say to myself is I caught myself saying this here. Lindor always starts off slow. So even if he starts off slow because of injury, the Mets will do that. But to your point, when Lindor starts off slow, the Mets have felt it more. And we even felt it more last year. The Mets did, I think, too, because Soto started off slow. So now you're going to have to see other guys step up. But I think the potential, if you said, for guys to hit 20 homers, to a guy like Bichette, who's a professional hitter, will help drive and runs and also just get on base and set the table as well too. I think that's going to matter. And the thing you hear all the time is, I'm going to say this name again, everybody said about the Cheeto Bear when he went down to Baltimore, well, what are you going to do? How are you going to replace his home runs? I know you heard this, Carson. That was the talk. What are you going to do? You know what? It doesn't have to come in one player. You can spread that out. Guys can be better. Maybe a guy like Francisco Alvarez hits better. Maybe Vientos bounces back. I know there's a lot of ifs. I understand that. But they're not impossible. And having a little versatility, a little flexibility, a little diversity in the lineup, not a bad thing to me.
Yeah, and I think that it's been proven with a lot of playoff teams that have had a lot of success recently of how they have been threats, whether it is the balance of contact and power. And like you said, of replacing that production, because not only did they lose their first baseman, they also traded away their left fielder in Brandon Nimmo to Texas, who also was a 25 home run bat last year. And there is, projection systems as of right now, which again, projections aren't everything. And that's one of those things where I think a lot of people completely attack it and they're like, oh, this doesn't mean anything. But it's more of just balancing out what you're going to get from the team in overall production for an entire year. And I feel like the team projections are a little bit more meaningful in comparison to overall individual performances. And if you were to look at the projected home runs for the Mets, they are 4th as of right now in average projected home runs through every single projection system, whether you're talking about Steamer, ATC, the Bat X, which is one of my favorites, Zips, out of park baseball, whatever you want to talk about, average 229, which is 229 compared to the last 5 seasons is more than the last 5 seasons that this team has had. 229 this year that is being. Yeah, exactly. That this year 229
right
for this team. 2021 they hit 176. 2022 they hit 171. 2023 they hit 215. 2024 207, and then last year 224.
Sign me
so
up.
This year 229. So where are you replacing that production that we lost? I think I know where we're going to be doing it, with an actual team that, again, doesn't fall apart
right.
when one guy is not hitting. And I think that that's one thing that is one of the factors as to why I think the success is going to be seen as. And then also you add in factors that complement it in of a new coaching staff, which we have talked about a lot on this show. I'll be as quick and brief as I can be with this, even though I could go on for hours with this, of the former hitting coach and the former pitching coach. But I felt like the message that was being sent was very inconsistent. And as to where it went, I think that as of right now, there's a little bit more of a modernized and more of a balanced approach as of right now to where they can be an efficient team. And when I say efficient, I don't mean a team that is completely perfect. I mean it as a team that is efficient. Like, you also talk about basketball, 4 out of 10. 4 out of 10, that's an elite shooter from 3-point range. That's not completely perfect. And I don't talk about this as perfection. And I think that a lot of the complaints that I've made over that 2025 team, which I was calling out in May, saying that they were not playing efficient baseball and this was going to catch up to them. And, people can go after me as much as they want. That's fine. But it came to a point as to how they were playing, the quality of the wins. I was like, okay, this is not going to stay. This is not going to stay up the way that they are performing in these certain situations, not to mention the defense, which was awful, the base running, which was just awful. It was not a team that was, 21 games over 500 at that one point before the team just completely tumbled. And it just looked as, a team that just did not have, any of this, fight in it. And I feel like it all really just came from the message that was being sent, whether it was from the coaches or maybe some of the players that they let go, that they were like, okay, yeah, you're good players individually, but the message that's being sent here, it's inconsistent. It's not fantastic. So I think at one point you have to look into the core of the team when you continue to fail like this.
To me, it's easier, Carson, to not do that. I think it's easier to say,
absolutely. It's easier to play fantasy baseball.
Yeah, exactly. It is. Let's run it back. I know what these numbers are going to be, but that's the thing about sports in particular. I know baseball is such a heavy number sports, right? We look into the numbers. We are going to look at all the analytics. We're going to look at the projections. We're going to talk about all this, and we're all guilty of this as people who create content and fans. But I say this all the time. I'll talk about this with basketball. I talk about it with football. I talk about it with baseball. What matters is the people stuff. And what I mean by that is how people are in the clubhouse. Is their fight is a word you mentioned. What is the message being relayed from the coaching staff? Players have agency. Players are not robots, right? Neither are managers or coaches. And we like to think, oh, we put this person in. This isn't playing the show, okay? This is real baseball where things are going to happen. If the vibes aren't right in the locker room, I'm not saying that it was the end of the world in the locker room, but what I'm saying is if the leadership isn't all connected together, well, it comes to feel. You know why we love 2024? You know why Mets fans love 2006 or 2015? The vibes looked good. It felt good. You could feel it through the TV when you were at Citi Field or Shea. You felt like you could see all that, right? And when it's good, it's good. But you also could see it when it's not. And it takes a real leadership to look at that and say, hey, the people stuff right here, not working. Let's change that. It's been comfortable to say, hey, I know what Cheeto Bear gives me. I know what the back of his baseball card says. I know what he's going to do, right? One other point I just want to mention real quickly. I'm sorry, we're having a great conversation about this. I'm thoroughly enjoying it because it's really, I feel like it's really rooted in a lot of logic and not so much emotion. Yeah. But everybody focuses on what you lose with the Cheeto Bear and the power. But what might you gain by having some players who, dare I say, might strike out a little less, might get on base for you a little bit more. Maybe that continues more rallies for you. Maybe, let's say the Mets can
throw the ball to first base.
I was trying.
Sorry.
I was trying not to say it. So I hear you. maybe some of those things happen. Does that, I don't know, does that translate to 3 more wins, 5 more wins? Does that have some sustained rallies in games where you were not able to come back? I think there's value to those things sometimes instead of just looking at the home runs, right?
Yeah.
How many times did we see the Mets last year not be able to sustain rallies? We all know the numbers. They didn't come back after the 8th inning. We all know that, right? There was never, you didn't see that fight in the team. I remember my cousin, shout out to my cousin Monique, who's a huge Mets fan. She would say that. She was like, I don't see the fight in this team late. And it was so jarring because you had seen that a year ago.
Absolutely.
Right? Now, listen, do I think it was all Jose Iglesias and OMG vibes and all that? No, it's not just that. I'm not saying that had nothing to do with it. I'm not saying that.
No.
But it's everything matters. And I think that there should be more applause and more respect given to management in any sport, in any team, where they say, you know what? See a problem here. We're not going to stay the same. It is unacceptable for us to stay the same. In fact, if we want to push this organization forward, we have to be better. And it starts with looking at me, looking at coaches, looking at players, and saying, let's do what we have to do. So I appreciate you applauding it because it's not, and I think I was on the Till Mets Do Us Part podcast. So shout out to Ibby and John. I was on that with them. We were talking about this too before Bichette was signed and all that. It's like, we're trying to look at this rationally. And not everybody in the fan base has done that. Everybody's jumping out the window after the Cheeto Bear went down to Baltimore. I think the Mets are going to be okay. I'm just saying, I think the Mets are going to be okay. They'll be fine.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing that I'll add, and we can get into what Steve Cohen, we're kind of pushing Steve Cohen down the pipeline here. But I mean, I already said with the whole situation with, the Cheeto Bear himself, as we were referring to him as the full-on lingo here. I accepted personally, and again, I just look at this from such a different phase because I don't like seeing things happen over and over and over again. I'm a big proponent of doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Yeah. It's the definition of insanity. And when it came to, that whole situation, it just is second that he signed with Scott Boras. I was like, with the player that he kind of is and the way that he's trying to market himself, I was like, I kind of mourned him going already. Like it was one of those things where like, if he goes, he goes, he stays, they're going to move on. And there's nothing, there's no trophy case that tells me we really, really have to keep this together. And this is going to continue to sustain because they haven't sustained anything. But either way, with that message, it kind of is reiterated with what Steve Cohen has been saying and what he said on Monday afternoon. Some of the notes here that I just had here, he said that, genuinely he is excited about the team and he feels a fresh wave of optimism throughout the organization. He admitted that he is annoyed and frustrated by the lack of winning, stressing that he's fully committed to doing whatever it takes to put the organization in the best position to succeed. He shared that he understands the fans' disappointment when popular players left this offseason, noting he built personal relationships with many of them, and he felt it too. Because we all know, Steve Cohen is also a Mets fan. He realized how deeply the fan base cares, and that going 40 years without a title is simply too long, and I think we all can agree with that, saying that he reaffirmed his confidence in the Mets leadership group that includes Carlos Mendoza and David Stearns. He pointed out a strong energy in the morning team meeting, which was Monday, and he believes this group will play a different style of baseball this season. And then there was that little tip-off that, of course, we talked about with the leadership, where he actually said that as long as he owns the team, there will not be a team captain named. And he said that has been his call from the get-go, saying that he prefers leadership to develop naturally in the clubhouse each year rather than being completely assigned. And he also gave this quote that I do want to put on here on the full outlook of the 2026 Mets. He said that I really like the team that we built. I feel like it's going to be a fun team to watch, a lot of contact, better defense. We are going to have young players starting to come out of the minor leagues and play and really affect the performance of our team. So he's looking at that from the overview. I think we can probably get into more of the leadership, like we said, because leadership, it shows, and it really does show as to, what you see on the field. I can refer to the Rangers here, like what they were showing as the leadership group. It showed, but I can go on for that forever. But it came to a point where, I agree with this 100% that you need to look at it from, they need to be clubhouse veterans. There needs to be clubhouse voices, guys who lead by example. You need a combination of all of that instead of just saying, well, there's our captain, salute to him. That's it.
Mm-hmm. You need more than that. It's other guys. That before, and my colleague had wrote about this, Mike Puma, does a fantastic job covering the Mets. There had been something got to my attention about before he had wrote the story about the Lindor, the supposed, and he wasn't saying that there was beef. So I just want to be very specific on that. But the supposed rift between Lindor and Soto. Someone had brought this to my attention that works in sports media. And I said, let me check in on that. And what I was told is actually some of what Mike had reported in that Lindor and Soto, there's no beef between them, but nobody would describe them as like best friends. And I heard that and said, okay, well, sometimes we all work with people that we're cool with to get the job done, but you're not going out for drinks after work, and that's fine, right? Like, it doesn't mean it, you just have different styles about how you may go about things or just different vibes, and it's cool. I thought people were overblowing some of that stuff there between those two players. Now, some of the other stuff that could be around those players, that matters. That can matter, right? It's about, are guys is connected? Are they connected for the long term of this team?
Yeah.
It can't just be on Soto. Soto or Lindor. And I mean Lindor specifically. I think a lot of Mets fans view Lindor as the de facto captain, and I think rightfully so. I personally, I don't know how you feel, Carson. I'm actually kind of curious as to how you feel about this. I wasn't terribly bothered by Steve Cohen saying, like, I'm never going to name a captain. I maybe was a little shocked that he locked himself into that. Like, as long as I own the team, I'm not going to do that. Yeah. But that is his prerogative. I don't think it really matters. I think what matters is, do you build a sustainable culture of winning and accountability in the clubhouse? Yeah. That's what I care about. Because as we follow this team, root for this team, etc., players are going to change. Managers are going to change. The hope is Cohen and David Stearns are here for a while. And with them, if the culture or the standard, if the Mets can actually build a standard, because I'm not sure what the Mets standard is. And I'm saying this is somebody who grew up rooting for the Mets. Like, what are we talking about? What is the standard? You have to establish it first. And I think part of the way of establishing it is something we talked about so much at the beginning of the show, which is, sometimes you got to change some things. And so to your point, yes, different voices have to emerge. It can't all just be on Francisco Lindor. It can't. He has to be supported. Yes, he's a guy that's going to lead one way. Soto could lead another way. Bo Bichette might come in and the way his vibe is and how he leads, but it has to be all about being tied to the common goal. It has to be all about winning, and it has to all be about accountability. That's because you're going to have ups and downs. There is going to be a 3-game losing streak in the middle of May, and the fans are going to freak out. But the players can't. They can't do that, right? Things are going to happen. Somebody's going to get hurt. It's baseball. Somebody's going to go through a cold spell at the plate. Devin Williams is going to blow 2 saves in May, and Citi Field is going to be booing, which I hope doesn't happen for his sake, but probably will. these things are going to happen. It's about how do you bounce back from that? How do you handle the adversity?
Absolutely.
Last year, it looked like, granted, I'm with you, and I saw some of the problems early, particularly on defense, that concerned me a lot. And when things went wrong defensively for this team, and we saw this last year, one error happened, then it seemed like two, then it seemed like three, right? And then it all seemed to snowball. And what bothered me watching that was, okay, who's going to say the buck stops here? We got to clean this up. This is going to happen. I'm not saying that wasn't said in the clubhouse. I'm not, because I don't know that.
Yeah.
But the results were, that's not what we saw. We didn't see it cleaned up at all.
No.
So, yes, there has to be a diversity of what we're talking a lot about diversity and flexibility, Carson.
Yeah.
There has to be that in terms of leadership too. And I think we all can understand that. I would encourage people, please think of your own jobs, whatever it is that you do, we all work with other people. And yeah, you might have a boss, but you might have somebody in your team that what you do, they step up in one way and this person steps up in another way. But if you're going to be great at whatever it is that you do for work, everybody has to come together and there has to be accountability. Good organizations have that. Bad organizations do not. Because all organizations, no matter what you do, you're going to go through a rough time, a rough period. It's about how you respond to it. That's the biggest thing I'm going to watch for this 2025 Mets. Sorry for my long rant on that, but that's the biggest thing I'm going to watch.
It's again, it was something that I think we all knew that it was a little bit different. The vibe seemed a little off, and maybe considering in comparison to 2024, where the vibes were at such a all-time high, but they also had some lows as well. I think a lot of people don't remember that those first 2 months were brutal to watch. And it's all really just about finding that median and having that consistency. Like, I don't want to go into a season where I have to win that last game of the season. I would like to have some of that stability, like the way that they were succeeding or the way that they were failing, like they couldn't sustain that way. In 2024, they were never repeating what they were doing, ever. Like, that was not repeatable whatsoever. And I say the same thing about the 2022 team, which don't even get me started on that. But it comes to a point of what's sustainable and what isn't.
Right.
Jose Iglesias harboring a 830 OPS and being your second best hitter at 35 years old, that wasn't going to happen the next year. Absolutely. It just wasn't.
Yep.
It comes to a point of sustainability where you have to look at it. It's like, okay, maybe it doesn't look like that at face value, but changes do need to be made so this doesn't continue to snowball. And I've been in that corner 100%, and I think it shows as to what they are trying to do. Even if I don't agree with it 100%, I think when it comes to the whole point of the leadership in the clubhouse, Marcus Semien, that was a known clubhouse leader.
Agreed.
Jorge Polanco, great clubhouse guy. Everyone likes Bo Bichette and his drive and everything. I'm, of course, a huge advanced analytics guy, but I also will put into account as to where there's other points that are important as to why the team succeeds or not. Leadership is one of them. Completely. Leading by example is one of them. And I feel like Lindor is very vocal. Soto is a lead by example type of guy.
Yep.
Personally, when it came out, that whole story that came out from Mike Puma, I never really completely, actually, my reaction was more to the Jeff McNeil stuff, because my relationship with Jeff McNeil is a whole different thing. But when it came to the Lindor and Soto thing, it just seemed like, hey, these are two different people. They're just two different people. That's it.
Right.
And
that's how I took it too.
Pretty, like, it didn't seem like, oh, they didn't like each other, or there was, verbal screaming matches, and it seemed like they're just two completely different people, and sometimes opposites attract. Yeah. And I know that when it comes to Lindor and Soto, those are winning ball players. Those are guys that will win. They're veterans and they're in the prime of their career. So I just know that that's one of the things that, that message does need to be sent. And I really do like the Mets stopping things before they completely snowball the way that they did. And I think that they did a good job with that even last year, even though they did fail. They went to the NLCS, Game 6 of the NLCS, and they didn't look at it like 2022 and just bring everybody back and fill in these holes with and make the team even older the way that they did in 2023. They were just like, hey, well, we know that winning a World Series is our goal here. Let's bring in Juan Soto. Let's deepen this, let's load up the pitching staff. Granted, there was things that didn't work, obviously, and there's things that, I feel like they were tied into as to why the team had so many deficiencies. However, they need, that type of leadership to get over that hump. And King Dream saying in the chat saying, are we talking leadership or championship? You need leadership to go to a championship. Like, yep. It's more of the fact of Mets fans look at it. It's like, oh, well, I want to win a World Series right now. Well, you got to get there first. And the Mets haven't shown that consistency as to where, well, we'll be back. Like 2015, they went to the World Series. Did they ever come back? No, they didn't.
No.
A
lot of us would have thought then they were going to be back. And listen, things in sports can be so fleeting. But yeah, listen, I took it the same way as you. When I read Puma's article, and obviously I had Puma on, I've talked to him about it, and I was more intrigued by the Jeff McNeil stuff more than anything. I'm the same way. I wasn't in the Mets clubhouse as much last year. I will be more this year. I never saw anything that made you think Lindor or Soto didn't get along. Not my thing. I can say this for sure, and this was reported by Mike and other people. Soto is very much lead by example, as you just said, Carson. Very businesslike. Younger players love him. They want to work with him. They want to follow him. Same for Lindor. They both have I would say, a ability to have the respect of the younger players on the squad. And I think that's a great thing. They just go about in different ways. Soto's like, look, I show up to the ballpark. I'm on time. I do all this stuff. I'm putting the extra work in the batting cages. That's his vibe. Lindor is the same. I'm not saying that he's not. I don't mean to imply that Lindor is not that. Lindor is just also, I'm going to be a little bit more rah-rah. I'm going to go sit and talk to a guy in the clubhouse just down. I'm going to give him a little bit more of a pep talk. That's just the way that he goes about it. And it's good to have two different leaders that approach things from different styles. Yep. You would not want a clubhouse full of rah-rah guys. If I was playing personally, I would hate that. Like, I wouldn't want everybody to be rah-rah. That'd be just too much. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I think people have to. You're going to see the leadership, and you're going to see new leaders emerge on this team, and that's going to be fascinating to watch, right? And we'll see how that goes. But yeah, change in leadership was good too. That also is a good thing. Not just the talent and what you can produce on the field, but let's see how some of these other guys lead. We don't, and who knows? I don't know what the value of Bo Bichette's leadership is yet. I don't know what the value of like a Jorge Polanco is. We've heard nothing but amazing things about Marcus Semien. He is well regarded as a leader in every clubhouse that he's been in. So I would only expect other good things with him coming in here. But we'll see how some of the other guys step up and lead. I'm very intrigued to see that, how they support the main leaders on this team.
I just want a team. That's little. I want a group of 26 players that are willing to do anything to win, and not we have this player and they'll just carry us to victory and cover all the flaws. I don't want to see that. I don't want to see a top heavy team. Like, I don't need to see a team that has DJ Stewart in the opening day lineup because there was one injury. I want to see a little bit more of a deep team.
Some shade right there, Carson.
Yeah, I mean, listen, DJ Stewart had some moments, obviously, but we know that like he's not an everyday player typically. And it's one of those things. It's like, oh well, we have the richest owner in base. Those are the points where you're like, okay, we have the richest owner in baseball. Why are we rostering some of these players that we know don't belong on a major league roster? No disrespect to some of those players, obviously, but it's like we know that they don't belong there. Like, you kind of feel bad for them sometimes when they don't play well, because it's like they're put into such a crappy situation that it makes absolutely no sense as to why, when they have such resources that they should be using to build a team, and not just, well, let's keep these players happy, let's throw all this money at these players. They got to do it in a smart way to build an actual team. And I think that that's the message that was just sent from Steve Cohen. And I don't know if any of it was backhanded or not. I doubt it was, because like he said, he had personal relationships with some of these players, but those players had their deficiencies too. It's not like they were, they were completely perfect. And
Right.
when people continue to say that we should continue to go back into the well, it's like, no, like you got to move on. I mean, this was that 2019 core of players, and we've talked about it plenty of times on this team. It was just like they needed change. They just needed to move on, and if that had to come at the cost of fan favorites, so be it, because there was no trophy case backing you up to continue this way, and it was only just going to get worse. I'm happy, like we said, with the Cheeto Bear there. I'm happy that I was able to see the prime of his career, but I don't have to watch him decline. Like I don't have to watch that when that the cause and effect, like I said, it's like you had to move on. It just had to move on. And speaking of that change, I do, since you said you can stay on for a little bit.
Yes, I can.
Yeah, so I do want to get into Justin Willard's outlook on the Mets rotation, because obviously it sprung a lot of question marks, obviously, with this rotation, even getting Freddie Peralta, which he actually did not discuss with Will Salmon. Will Salmon, one of the best, by the way.
Shout out to Will.
And he put out a article about kind of the outlook for a lot of the pitchers in this rotation, which I think a lot of people have question marks about, of them sustaining. So there was some notes that were given out for each pitcher. And I asked you guys in the chat, in the YouTube chat, on Twitter, it doesn't seem like it has been working these past few weeks as to the streams getting out, but it's whatever in that sense. But I asked you guys in a poll of which one of these Mets starters do you believe is poised for a bounce back season. But it comes to a point from Justin Willard, the new pitching coach, where, again, a new message being sent. And for some of the notes that he brought out from Will Salmon of The Athletic, if he has it on his Twitter, I can link it in the description if you guys want to fully check it out. He talked about Sean Manaea, of kind of readjusting the arm slot back to the 2024 form for his health, obviously, with him having an injury-riddled season in 2025, reviving his changeup to reduce the fastball sweeper reliance, and then they're also targeting 30-plus starts and 200 strikeouts with the swing and miss stuff that he even showed in 2025, but he just was not fully there yet. Kodai Senga, one of the big factors here, focusing on the fastball forkball pairing post-injury. He's also using some video for restrictive consistency with his mechanics, as we saw that was kind of an issue for Kodai Senga. Understanding how to ramp up for the mid-season stresses of the entire dog days of summer, let's just say that, of a 162-game season, which, again, is something that we see in a different light with Kodai Senga, who has someone who's been more of a benefit of a six-man rotation and has kind of got more rest. So that is definitely a point of emphasis. Clay Holmes cutting down the walks, uncompetitive pitches versus left-handed hitters, exploring a revival of his curveball and or cutter usage. There's tons of other pitches that he can throw as well, but those are just two examples. And then, of course, supplementing the rest of his repertoire for the sinker, as we all know that the Mets are a little bit more sturdy up the middle with Simeon and Lindor defensively, not to mention in center field with Luis Robert Jr. Nolan McLean, understanding the pitchability of his pitches, given his top 1% ability to manipulate high spin. As we all know, he has some ridiculous stuff and ridiculous movement, but sometimes that is for the, sometimes it's more for their own good as well. And you kind of have to harvest it, the command of his cutter and his changeup as well, refining pitch location earlier in the count as to where he can set up, putting away batters with such of his great secondary stuff. And then David Peterson, 30-plus start consistency, which is something that he's really struggled with, of kind of a burnout towards the August-September realm of the baseball season, and improving the sequencing and maintaining that command against right-handed hitters, which he had right-handed hitters last year, I think, had a over 750 OPS against him. So if you guys want to see that article from Will Salmon, Great article, great rundown, and trust me, it's making me fall in love with what we're seeing from Justin Willard, of how he is just focusing on so many different things with these pitchers, but also just trying to bring it into their everyday routine so they can progress into these sustainable starters. So I guess I'll just ask you straight up. I mean, do you see, like, is there anything that stands out to you that you hope comes to fruition? Because we know that the pitching staff was an issue last year. The consistency, the overall sustainability too. I mean, the first 2 months they were top 10 in almost every category, and then June, July, August hit, and it was a disaster.
So the standout thing for me, because I think you asked a question about which pitcher you think could bounce back has the best chance to bounce back the most. And if I'll answer that first and say, you asked that to the chat. I think it's Sean Manaea. I would trust him the most. My man
right there.
But, and I'll get back to Sean Manaea in a second. I just want to go ahead off of that for a second. Yeah. But the pitcher that I think is the biggest X factor in the rotation that can really make this rotation be really damn good, or just, they're all right, it's Kodai Senga.
Absolutely.
And the thing with Kodai Senga is, it was that last note you had from Will Salmon's great talk that he had with Justin Willard, which was, can you get him through the dog days? Can he get through pitching a certain amount of innings and you saying, oh, I can count on him? Because when Kodai Senga's been healthy, we know this stuff has been good. There's a way in which you look at him and the signing of Kodai Senga, and you could say, if he stayed on the field a little bit more, which is a whole bunch of ifs, I get it, guys.
Oh, yeah.
He's one of the better signings in Mets history in terms of his production. Like, if we're just talking about how he has produced when he's been healthy, it's a damn good signing. But the problem is he hasn't always been healthy. And the problem is he can't get through a season. Then he tried to come back at the end of last season. We know what happened with that. If he can do that, that's the biggest thing. It's just like, can he give us innings? Can he give innings to this Mets team as they're going through? That to me is a big question for him. Now, with Sean Manaea, can he get back to the form and throw his pitches with confidence the way we saw in 2024? I think so much of it for him wasn't that I don't think that he can throw those pitches with confidence. I think it's just more if he wasn't healthy. And I think if he is indeed healthy and the elbow's cleaned up and everything is good, I think he will be fine. The other guy I'm going to mention here, and it was the third guy you had in your question, David Peterson.
Yeah.
We've seen David Peterson good for half a year, twice, and then not good on the back end. Second half was not good for David Peterson last year. We all know this. I think one of the notes they had for him, that if I remember correctly, I don't want to misspeak there, but I think you said about him throwing, it actually might have been Clay Holmes too, which I thought was interesting. It was Clay Holmes. He talked about him throwing more competitive pitches, right? And we saw with Clay Holmes a lot, just to jump to him for a second, when things didn't go well. You got a little bit of Steven Matz flashback with him. Things didn't go well, and Holmes is not throwing as much competitive pitches. It seems to fluster, and then everything just falls apart. With Peterson, I just think he was at such a good level in the first half where I felt good about him. Now, I don't know if this is exhaustion. I don't know if it was distress. I kind of inclined to think this a little bit more, that he was more stressed for thinking that now he had to lead this rotation because Manaea wasn't there, because Senga wasn't there. There was a lot placed on David Peterson. So what I'm saying now is, with Freddie Peralta, if Sean Manaea pitches, I'll even say 80% of what we saw from him in 2024. Let's just say we get that. And Kodai Senga is actually not hurt. Well, that's a lot less stress on David Peterson. This is the little thing I'm talking about, even with pitching, Carson. This is where the people stuff matters. People feel things.
Yeah.
If I'm asking you to do more with less, you're going to feel it, right? If you don't, and you were just talking about David Peterson being a 4-starter with his talent and his stuff, and we've seen him be able to pitch and have some really good games. Well, now it's a different situation. So with all that being said, that is a very long way of saying, where we're looking individually at these pitchers, and we don't know what we're going to get from Nolan McLean. And Nolan McLean, we hope that he improves and builds, but development isn't always linear. is what I would say. So I will pump the brakes on everybody for that. Yeah. I think you want to see from Nolan McClain this year how he learns. There's probably going to be some times some lineups are going to hurt him. How does he bounce back? What's the mental fortitude? Those are the things I want to see. But with all that being said, the key for this rotation is health. It is health.
Absolutely.
It is health. It is health. The talent is there. Would I still like probably another guy who shows me to be that true frontline starter on this team along with Peralta? Yes, maybe that's McClain, but I think it's too much to put on the kid right now. Maybe that's him. But as far as right now goes, if there's relatively good health for this pitching rotation, I think the Mets can be fine. If there isn't, now you're going to be talking about some things. But I also want to add one thing, and I want to ask you this, Carson. If there isn't relatively good health, are you comfortable in what else they have? Are we talking about a guy like Christian Scott, who we saw look good a couple of years ago before the Tommy John, coming in and helping? Do you feel good about what's coming for the Mets and Jonah Tong as well too? Do you feel good what's coming for the Mets that those guys can step in and then perform?
I definitely have confidence into what they're building from the ground up. Mm-hmm. I think that internally there is going to be a chance for almost any of these young pitchers that they have been developing, whether it's in a blue chip level like somebody like Nolan McClain, or you're talking about Jack Wenninger or some of these guys in the minor league system that have had this success. And I really do think that a lot of this pitching lab talk where there was a lot of talk about from Mets fans saying, well, they can't continue. The pitching's not that great at the major league level because that's what they see at the face value. I feel like a lot of it came from the ground up of these new pitchers that are more accustomed to this era of pitching. And I feel like it came a little bit more from the minors, from the ground up, as to what this pitching lab has seen. And sure, it helped out some guys like Sean Manaea. There was adjustments made by Jose Quintana down the stretch of the season. He was phenomenal in 2024. Yep. But there's plenty of things where I think there was a little bit of disconnect between the minor league system and the major league system. But now when you see that overlap and you see some of these guys start to maybe get ready for somewhat, you just traded away Brandon Sproat, and you still have plenty of surplus of these pitchers that have been really, really good at high levels, high A, double A. I am definitely so trusting into what Stearns does with pitching. And I think that it's always like one or two of these guys, maybe they're going to hit. And I feel like there is a mindset as to where they have so much more depth in this minor league system that I feel like if they were to call up someone to make their debut, I would be the first one to buy a ticket to watch it. I am so excited to see how they continue with a pipeline, because we all know pitching's expensive. It will continue to be expensive. And for me, it's all about those young, controllable pieces to build around. I've always been someone who doesn't want to, shell out insane money for Cy Young Award winners that are about to turn 30. I like this development of young arms, and maybe some people see that as this is going to be a question mark. You never know. We can't rely on this. Sure, you can't rely on it, but they have so many different avenues that they can go by with the resources that they have, that I am definitely confident in what they have. If health isn't a factor, it isn't a factor. And I think when we talk about health in returns to Kodai Senga, like you were talking about with, the mental aspect and, these guys being people, we've talked about this a lot on our show as to there's a strong possibility that maybe Kodai Senga, he's just like his mental game is just not the best. And there's a possibility where, he needs the extra day or he needs time to fix his mechanics. We talked about this before, how maybe, he wasn't there was reports about him throwing a bullpen in Port St. Lucie when he was optioned down to AAA. And he was like, maybe the hot weather was bothering him in late September. And it's like, how long are we going to go with this when we're realize like, okay, this is what we know what he is, but it also comes into a factor of how these guys succeed under this certain pressure. And we saw that with Kodai Senga in his rookie year, where he was put in there to be a 3 behind Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer, who were first ballot Hall of Famers. Now, obviously, those guys ended up not being on the team in late August, and they weren't competing at that current point. But he turned into really the best moment, the best stretch of his career. And I think that's the point as to how it's not just the names that need to go into the rotation. It's the amount of arms that you have. And I feel like right now the Mets have so many of these arms, whether it's talking about in the major league level, where right now you're penciled in for a 6-man rotation of guys who are getting stretched out as a starter. Then you also have like multiple players who are multiple guys who are very close to major league ready that'll start off in AAA. Yep. Scott, who just completely missed the year because of Tommy John surgery. You have Jonah Tong, who we know that they're very, very high on. Yep. Obviously, Nolan McLean, I would give him. I'm giving him a spot in the starting rotation on opening day, obviously. But it also goes down to the next point as to the Wenningers, or there's other guys. Like there's plenty of pieces that I'm not even thinking of as of right now that are going through the pipeline right now, and that's what they need. They need a pipeline of pitchers just to keep pumping them out over and over again. That's the one thing that frustrated me so much with the previous pitching coach, who is now in Atlanta, as to where it never seemed like there was any development. It seemed like we were always getting the short end of the stick with a lot of these pitchers, and a lot of the success stories you can count on like one hand. And it just didn't seem like it was fluid enough, like the Rays do, where they just come out of nowhere with a new pitcher. They can trade a star caliber Cy Young winner, and then the next year their pitching staff is still one of the best. Or Milwaukee, or these teams that have a pipeline of pitchers that just continue to flow. And they needed to build from the ground up in that way. And I really think that is something that is going to be very beneficial to the Mets pitching in the future, because, yes, there's that guy in Freddie Peralta who is a pending free agent who I would love to see them try to extend. However, you also have other pieces that can be plugged in. And I really am I'm excited to see the development, finally actual development of arms, where, like I just said with the rotation, if some guy, the lineup, where I said it's like if one guy goes down, the entire tower doesn't, the entire building doesn't, get set on fire.
Right.
It's like that's how you build, a fluctuating organization. That's kind of how the Dodgers did it. I mean, a lot of people don't credit to, yes, they have all these resources, but they also allocate everything in their farm system to get some of these guys as well. Yeah. So it's not like you just have prospects that it's like, oh, we need to plug these guys into the team. Similar to what they just did with Jet Williams and Brandon Sproat for Peralta. I mean, they supplemented their farm system. Somehow they're going to get allocated, and allocation doesn't just mean they're going to be playing on this team.
Right.
There's plenty of resources to go along.
Yeah, you have to use the resources to try to build a team as best you can. And some of it is, like you said, some of it will be via trade. Some of it will be if an injury comes up, a guy steps up. Some guys who might be starters just to keep it with pitching might end up being bullpen arms for you. That could be very prominent down the road. There's many ways to look at this and how you attack it. And I think that's what we're talking about when we keep using the F word here, right? The flexibility that they need here is also going to matter for pitching. And I think maybe besides health, I think that next biggest thing I'm looking at personally with the Mets pitching this year is, okay, what's that depth really like? Like, if something happens and Christian Scott comes up, a guy who I liked when we saw him a couple years ago before we got hurt. I liked his moxie. I thought there were some good things there. Obviously, ways to go in development, but there were some things I liked. If he comes in and you're like, oh, man, I feel like he could be good. And I'm not going to shade anybody by what I'm saying here, but this is different than you're saying, hey, I'm calling up Tyler McGill again.
Yeah.
It's a totally different vibe. You know what I mean? And so if you have that as a Mets fan, and you could see that coming and being like, I trust this organization. They're bringing these kids up when they're ready. They're keeping them ready. I trust the way the pitching lab is working now with the pitching coach, and it seems sustainable throughout. Now you're going to start feeling good that even if you lose a guy, or if let's say Senga doesn't cut it, and you're like, he can't deal with the hot weather. And I know some Mets fans, I've seen it. You've called him a diva. I've heard it. I've seen it, and I understand the frustration with it. Right? I get all that. But if something like that happens and there's somebody that can step in and is ready for this, the way David Stearns has operated, there's no reason for me to think that he won't do that. But the first step is you got to have the depth. You have to have depth that you trusted. And if they have that, I think that's going to be huge for them.
Yeah, it's all about the pipeline, personally. And that's the thing. It's like, where do you pivot to? How do you put a cushion there? Like, even with, the guy that they let go, who's in Baltimore, like, we can continue to continue to refer to him. What is the pipeline to it? Do you see if there's a free agent on the market? As of right now, there's a pillow as to where it's like, okay, they're high on Ryan Clifford. They want to see what he has. And if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. There always is a pivot because they remain flexible. I just feel like the way that they used to operate, it was always just, one piece of the Jenga tower and the entire thing just falls apart. Yep. And as of right now, I feel a little bit more confident in the lineup, the pitching. It's goes along with a lot of the theories that I have, and I go around all the time and I say, well, starting rotations don't even exist anymore. No one's ever healthy. Everyone gets hurt. It's just basically a bunch of disposable, and this is kind of gruesome when you think about it, but disposable bodies throughout an entire 162 game season, because that's all that the pitching position does now. It just gets hurt. That's it.
I think good teams look at it that way, though, Carson. What you just said.
Yeah,
I know it sounds really crass and crude, right?
Absolutely.
But good teams do look at it that way, and they think about it and say, well, we got to have as many arms as possible, and the pipeline, to your point, has to be flowing. And if that is happening, then we feel good because somebody's going to get hurt. And I know it's a very morbid and sad way to look at it too, but it's like, I mean, if you've been watching baseball, if you've been paying attention to your teams, somebody always gets hurt. And as you said earlier in the conversation, pitching's not getting any cheaper. It's
absolutely not.
Arguably the most valuable commodity in the game. So you got to have that pipeline. Yeah, you're right.
Absolutely. And if these are guys that you see as frontline pieces and core members of your team, you lock them down cheap. You try to, negotiate. You try. So like Nolan McLean, if you see a rookie of the year candidate type of year, try to extend him. Try to get extended before Scott Boras gets to his ear. Let's just say that. Yeah, Matt in the chat saying Clay has to stop doing sinker-only challenges and expand his arsenal, which is what Willard is working on. And that's one thing. It's like,
I did say that.
There's a lot of approaches. I feel like it seemed a little too cut and paste when it came to the previous pitching coach, and I even did an entire post about this because
I saw this.
I sometimes do the entirety of like a certain moment to kind of prove a point as to why things need to change, and I did a full rundown of all of the injuries and injured list stints that you had under Jeremy Hefner. It was a total of 117 IL stints that you had in 6 years, which is not normal. But also you look at another point of emphasis that I put here as to where 27 of those pitchers that he worked with, just 27 in 6 years, had 0 IL stints, and 23 of them were here for 1 year or less. So it's like, that's one of those things. It's like, oh, well, somebody drops dead, we're all dead. Like those are those one things. Right. It's like it comes to a point where I'm like, okay, I'm not completely scapegoating Jeremy Hefner in this way. I mean, maybe I am, but I'm not completely scapegoating it.
That, but yeah.
It's one of those things where a change needed to be made. And obviously this is an early victory lap of a point that I'm trying to make here. But like, if you were to do a comparison like this right now, I mean, camp started 9 days ago?
Yep.
Have we heard one pitching injury at all yet? And obviously, I know that's probably something that's like, right now, something's going to come out.
But everybody's going to blame you, Carson.
Everyone's going to blame. That's fine. Go ahead and blame me. That's fine. But it's one of those things. It's like, it's about really just that consistent fold, and you're going to have injuries. It's not like you're not going to. Yeah. That's basically all this position does. However, it's more of just the thought of, well, if you have an overload of injuries, where do you pivot to next? It's not just some, guy who shouldn't be in the major leagues that we, trade cash for and we just shove into the starting rotation. Homegrown guys, that you have developed and maybe they can apply that type of thing and help you contribute and give you what you need. And there's also a point of where I talked about the coaching staff. It's like, not only did they need to get new coaches and they needed to clean out that coaching staff, they also had to get rid of some of the pieces that they maybe infected. There's pieces like that I feel like it's damage beyond repair. And like we said, the sunk costs moving on in that way. And, and in comparison to, and I'm not trying to say this as a complete flex because I'm not rooting for injuries whatsoever, obviously. But we look at the Braves already throughout camp. They already have 2 injuries to their starting rotation.
It's funny. I had not, it's funny.
And who is their pitching coach? And I'm not saying that it's him, but I'm just saying it's like.
I hear you.
The last 6 years, we've had a starter go down in spring training off the plane. They get hurt on the plane,
So you're bringing up something that I've long discussed with my cousin I mentioned before, Monique, who's a big Mets fan. And we always have talked about, it's so tough to gauge, but I hear your point. And now it seems like there's some at least small sample size data that makes Jeremy Hefner not look good here. Yeah. We've always wondered, is it how much of injuries you would see to the Mets pitching staff? Is it training? Is it the way they're pitching from spring training? Is it what they're doing in the recovery days? There are all these things I'm questioning, and the pitching coach does oversee a lot of that. Just want to be very clear, along with trainers. So I want to be very clear on that. But learning that the Braves have had 2 injuries to their pitching rotation after the point you made, that I was not aware of that. I honestly actually wasn't aware of that, and it doesn't look good. And now I'm very intrigued to watch how either healthy the Mets come out of camp. And again, we're not saying the injuries will never happen. I know you weren't saying that.
Absolutely.
So I don't want to repeat this for the people. I know you're not saying that.
It's about efficiency. It's about efficiency, not perfection. Let's keep 80% of our pitching staff healthy instead of 55%. That's kind of how I look at it.
That helps a lot.
It does help. And like you said, the factor is in health. And I'm not trying to completely scapegoat, the coaching or whatever, but as you noticed when they brought him in, I'm not saying it's the full on factor as to why, but we can even go back to, when we're talking about sunk costs. When did the injuries start with Jacob deGrom? 2021. When was Jeremy Hefner hired? 2020, 2021. There's connections that are made here that I make sometimes in my head. I'm like, okay, maybe there's something to be proven here. And it just, I just feel like there was a lot of underwhelming. There was a lot of overall extremes, a lot of absolutes under the old pitching staffs. And now I just feel like it's a lot more optimal. And that's why I think I'm a little bit more comfortable in that. And what they're building from the ground up, I feel like there's just better philosophies, better messages being sent of what is good, what is bad, what's efficient, what's inefficient.
Yeah, I'm someone who tends, and I think I talked about this on Straight Outta Flushing. I'm trying to remember. I remember doing something on this when the Mets had all these, all the coaching changes they made in, when was that, October, November, when all the news came out about that. And one of the things, I don't get too crazy about pitching and hitting coaches, except for one thing. I'm on the word that you're on. For me, it's about efficiency. I've always said this. I put more stock in pitching coaches than I do hitting coaches. I want to say that because, when teams go through slumps, everybody wants to blame the hitting coach. And I'm always like, I'm not going as crazy in that. Pitching's different, though. Pitching to me is about efficiency, how they're training, how they're recovering, what is happening on the off days, what's the philosophy in how you're pitching to your team and the defense behind you. That's the stuff I really like to look at, right? What I want to say to support you, Carson.
Yeah.
Because some people might be like, Carson did a lot of thinking on this. He really thought it through with Jerry Hefner, and you should. But if Carson thought this, you don't think David Stearns looked at this data too? You don't think right? You don't think David Stearns also looked at this? And maybe said, I'm looking at this based on the results and the philosophy of what we're saying that we're trying to do. Well, if we're going to say we're trying to do, then I have to make sure I have a pitching coach that's aligned with my manager and Carlos Mendoza and aligned with the rest of the organization. So I'm just going to say I don't think what you're saying is far-fetched. And I don't think it's crazy to think that David Stearns also looked at the same things you looked at and maybe came to the same conclusion. And part of the reason he said a change had to be made here.
Yeah. And there's other things about Hefner I wasn't very pleased about and things like that. But it all really just came down to you have the resources that you have. Why are we still getting bested in the pitching category by teams that are bottom of the barrel payrolls in comparison? The Rays, the Brewers, even middle of the pack, like the Astros, a team that has a really good pitching pipeline. Even Detroit has started to, and they have ownership that has been cutting a lot of costs too, or looking to cut a lot of costs, obviously, with this whole situation with Skubal, that is going to be one of the main situations going into the offseason before that lockout starts. It's just one of those things where I think there's a lot of things that continue to be symbiotically a trend with this team, and trying to break that trend is realizing that this is not good enough, and we have to completely flip this around to either the message being sent, new players, a new attitude, something like that. All of these factors come into account, and I can continue to put out all of this data until I'm blue in the face. I would do it, because that's just the type of person I am. I look at pretty much everything, but it all just factors into from top to bottom what makes a great MLB organization. And when you see things like the Dodgers of how they built it up the way that they had, you can't just look at it as to what they are now, because what they were, it was a lot different. They had an old owner that was using the team as like a bargaining chip in his divorce. I mean, it was a mess.
Yep.
And does that sound familiar, Mets fans? Like, does that sound familiar as to that dysfunctionality? I mean, it takes time, and I feel like what they are building from the bottom up, I feel a lot more confident in that way in comparison to the old ways, which, I think that even with some of these guys that were successful, they had limits. They had deficiencies, like we said, with the players that just left. Guys like, Nimmo or McNeil, like there were deficiencies that the old regime didn't look at, and they didn't really care for.
I agree.
There's guys like I haven't even gotten into it. I'm sure we can dip into the chat and see Ibby trolling me with it. But Brett Beatty, I think, is also a product of a lot of deficiencies that they didn't look at in comparison to some of the guys that they could have drafted. And I'm not even going to get into that because I'm just going to, my entire face is going to turn purple. But it's one of those situations where the Mets' old ways, they catch up to them, and they needed to go into new ways. And once those new ways come in, it takes a little time, and they can't be sitting here to rush it.
I agree.
Like my fellow Ranger fans in here are saying.
Yeah, don't rush the process and be like the Rangers. Don't do that.
Don't do it.
I understand it's a little different in the salary cap sport, but still,
obviously,
can't rush this process. That is true across all sports. Agree.
Yeah, and I know a lot of Mets fans don't want to hear that. They don't, because they will say it at face value, and I understand face value from both angles. It's like, I've waited 40 years for them to win a champion.
So what's one more is what the thing I always say to somebody.
Exactly. What is one more? Exactly what is one more? And it's one of those things where let's create the process first, and then luckily right now you have an owner that wants to win now while that process is being made from the bottom up. And that was one thing of a guy who, in Steve Cohen, who is willing to spend those resources because, he, in theory, can flush $50,000 down the toilet. It will not, physically actually do it with $50,000 $1 bills, just flush it completely down the toilet and clog it. And it wouldn't affect him whatsoever. He's like, oh yeah, okay, on to the next golden toilet. It wouldn't matter. So it's just in such one of those situations where the Mets are in such a good spot. However, it does take time for that to grow. And I think that patience is something that gets very tested in this fan base. And I understand everybody wants to win. However, you also have to go through, like we said, with the dog days of the rotation, the dog days of summer, you have to go through the dog days of the Mets' old ways and kind of dissect it completely. It's like, what happened here? And let's make sure it doesn't happen again.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's just I am willing to have that patience. I don't know if it's just the fact that I'm 24 years old and I'm a lot younger in comparison to some of these fans.
You either got.
It's one of those things where I'm tired. I'm tired of the same thing. I'm tired of failing constantly. I really am.
And you've seen. Yeah. So somebody might say, "Well, Carson's young. He's seen less Mets baseball, had less pain in his Mets fandom." I think generally it's about how you look at sports, and either you are a patient person or you're not. Either you love the process of growth and change or you don't. And I think you have to love the process. I think in anything you do in life, I really, truly believe that. And the process isn't always going to be, beautiful flowers and sunshine. It's not always going to be that, right? But the thing you talked about, I think that's really dope that you said. And I love your awareness at your age as a Mets fan to have that, is you said you have to look at yourself, right? Before you can make the change of what needs to happen, you have to really look at yourself. And I really feel like this applies to people. This applies to any other job. You got to look and say, hey, what went wrong here? Can we fix this? And can we fix this so this does not happen again? Not that other mistakes won't happen. There'll be, to put a baseball terms, there's going to be some swings and misses. You are sometimes going to strike out on a player. Sometimes a player will not be a good fit. It happens. What you can have happen is they happen with high cost players, and you can't have multiple of those again and again and again. Those are the moves that sink franchises, right? Or you can't not have a plan B. And Mets fans notice, and maybe you don't know, Carson, I think you know enough of it. Sometimes it felt like the Mets didn't have a plan B, right? Yeah. Sometimes it felt like nothing was coming in the pipeline. What you don't want is that. I don't think it's wrong for you at your age to say, I want to see something sustainable. There's nothing wrong. You want to see your organization run well. You want to know you have a chance for a World Series. Are you going to win it every year? No. But would you like to have a chance? Yes. Would you like to know that when you need to reset, you trust the organization to do so the correct way? Yes. That's what I think Mets fans are really asking for. Now, look, there's going to be a lot of talk. I'm sure you'll talk about it. I'm going to have you on Straight Outta Flushing. You're going to come and join me. We're going to talk about it throughout the season. It's going to come up a lot of times. The Mets haven't won a championship in 40 years. I understand all that. I get all of that.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. If I said to you, I'm going to just throw this out for you as a Mets fan, Carson. If I said to you, this year will be a pretty good year for the Mets, but they won't win the World Series. Let's say they reach the NLCS. Let's just say that. They lose to the Dodgers. They won't win the World Series. Next year, somewhat the same, but 3 years from now, you get to the World Series and you get it done. And I'm going to add something else. After that, over the next 15 years, I won't tell you how much you're going to win, but you'll make another 3 World Series. Would you sign for that tomorrow?
Absolutely. Yeah. 100%.
Because that's what sustainability looks like. That's what sustainability looks like.
Steps in the right direction. Exactly. Yes. Steps in the right direction. I mean, it's not just what we have seen so far. And like we said, the definition of insanity constantly. They take a step forward and then they take a step back. We have seen it. And especially with this group and for this entire franchise, they never get back when something is at the highest peak. Nope. They just never get back. And I want to get back, especially when you have these resources where you can push to do so. I want to see that happen. And hopefully, we have a start of that tomorrow with spring training games starting, obviously. And maybe we do see a little bit of difference. It's just one of those things that I feel like I'm always watching of something I can keep my eye on to see if this does sustain. Because there are topics that do need to be discussed as to what we can change. Because there's some times where maybe you win a World Series and you're like, we still need to change this. Maybe we still need to change this. There's change that does need to be made. And obviously that's skipping far ahead. Like I said, you can't rush it. So it comes to a point where I get wanting to win a World Series right now. And the Mets have pushed to do it. However, if you want to be a respected organization, if you want to drop the Lowell Mets title, if you want to drop that entire identity, it's not by just spending a bunch of money, having a good season. It's about being a team that is respectable, like we were talking about with Pujols, the Cardinals that were in it almost every single year. And they looked at it, what they needed, maybe at the deadline, and they make their final push, and they were able to win. And obviously that's a different era of baseball, but it's just one of those things where you have to look at what is sustainable and what isn't. And what I feel like a lot with the Mets' previous front offices, it looked at it as, well, this happened, it'll happen again. And that's something that I think that has not been established by a guy in David Stearns, who, even though it was the top peak of the valley, like we said with the Jose Iglesias stuff, he looked at it and he was like, okay, this is not sustainable. This is not going to continue. A 36-year-old Jose Iglesias is not going to have a career year for us the next year. Maybe he had interest in a minor league deal and he didn't want to have much of a commitment. However, it came to a point it was like, okay, we still do need to make these changes. It's not just, well, it happened once, it's going to happen again. Because there are pieces of details, and that's where the advanced data comes in that can tell you what is efficient and what is not, what is going to continue and what is not. And I have even some questions about what is sustainable on this team. However, they need to play the games to answer those questions. And, there's a few things on this team where I'm like, okay, how does that continue? Kodai Senga's health is one of them. I think a lot of people on my show that watched my show for a long time, I'm not Brett Beatty's biggest fan. I've been very, very open about that. Let's see how he continues. I don't know how that fares well in right field in that utility role. I feel like we're just maybe continuing that whole situation with Jeff McNeil where they would just shove him in a position and just say, hey, we have this guy's bat.
Right.
I have questions with that bat too. I have questions about some things in the bullpen, about, the lack of velocity. I have a little bit of questions of that. But however, right now, those flaws in comparison to previous years, they can be fixed with a deadline, maybe. They could be fixed with, using some resources to make that final push. And with a baseball mind like David Stearns, who I think approaches it in that way as to where the team is at that current moment, I think it's very, adamant that we allow this patience in, even though it may not be the complete, absolute of, well, we're guaranteed to win. We're not going to beat the Dodgers. Okay, let the Dodgers beat you this year. Get there first. Let's get there first. How about that?
Yeah.
Because we didn't get there last year.
Not at all.
Not even close.
Not even close.
Let the Dodgers beat you. If you think the Dodgers will be fine, we still have to play the games. Maybe they win. Maybe they don't. Who knows? But they need a step in the right direction, which is the main reason as to why, even if they do have a successful season, go to the NLCS like you just said. I'm going to be like, okay, what's next? How are we going to make this look like it's not a fluke? How are we going to make this look like something that can sustain, where we are winners every year? I don't want to go into spring training every year and be like, I don't know. It's a $400 million payroll, but hey, I don't know. You need a little bit more of a okay, I know what this team can provide. I know what this team can do. And that's where I think the strengths and weaknesses get addressed. And that's one of those things where, I really am excited to see how they do so, because I think there is an emphasis of we cannot go like we have been going.
It's the first step.
And yeah, it's the acceptance of, I've talked about it already. It's like you have to realize that our way for 60 years has sucked. Our way sucks.
Yeah, it's a harsh reality, but you're right.
It is.
I won't belabor the point, but I agree with everything that you're saying there. It's a harsh reality, but you have to recognize that, and you have to make the change, and you have to. It's slow. Change is slow. It always has. It always will be. It's never as quick as we'd like it to be, but you have to respect when you want to start to change, because it's real comfortable to stay where you're at. It's real comfortable.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I have my comfort zones too in real life, and maybe I'm a hypocrite in that way, but it's like when it comes to baseball, something that that we are passionate, that any of us are passionate about. Mm-hmm. It's like you have to look at yourself in the mirror and say, for me, it's like I don't have that pride sense of some Mets fans that'll say, well, this guy is not a homegrown talent. This guy. I don't have that pride, because it's like, well, what have we won? What have we done on that big stage? It's like,
isn't the bottom line? Isn't the bottom line to win, Carson? Like,
absolutely.
I say that this was the point I made earlier. Whether you win, would you have liked to have won with Cheeto Bear? Sure. Would you have liked to have won with Jeff McNeil? Would you have liked to have won with Brandon Nimmo? I think people get way too attached to homegrown players, personally. I think it's nice when you have homegrown players. I get it. I don't want to make it sound like I don't see the value in players you see coming up through your system and developing and turning into really good players. But here's the key word, and winning, guys.
Yes.
Winning. You want all the things. You don't want I don't think anybody's fine with it just seeing them come up and turn into nice players that don't contribute to winning. You want them to win. The whole reason we're in this, the whole reason we love sports, the whole reason we follow this journey is we want to see the process and hopefully end with winning. We know it doesn't always end like that, but the goal is to win. That is the goal the last time I checked. So whether you win with Cheeto Bear or whether you don't win with Cheeto Bear, you're still going to be on that parade at the Canyon Heroes. If the Mets somehow won this year, and that would be fantastic, first time in 40 years would be amazing. Yeah. Carson will be at the parade, and I'll be at the parade, and nobody's going to say, maybe some of you will, I wish Cheeto Bear was here. You're going to say, I am damn happy the Mets won for the first time in 40 years. That's it.
My co-host Andrew says this all the time. He's like, I care about the front of the jersey and not the name on the back. Right? Whoever is playing in, exactly. Whoever is playing, for the Mets, I'm rooting for them to succeed, and I'm rooting for this team to succeed. I'm not going to sit here and pick out, all of my favorite players, and the team, got blown out 11-2, but my favorite player got 3 hits. I'm satisfied. No, I want the team to win. Right. It's that part of narrative ball that just makes me, completely. It's just like sick. It's like the goal is to win. The team needs to win. Yes. And those certain details need to be talked about if you don't. And we talked about this going into the off season. Obviously, with baseball being played tomorrow, we said this offseason is going to give you conversations that you're not comfortable having. And we all know that a lot of Mets fans are not comfortable right now. And maybe they have to see something new. However, it's one of those, it's like, you should have won then. You should have won if you couldn't do so. Either way, Dexter, it's been great to have you on as well.
Fun,
it seems like, fun. You definitely went a little bit longer than I thought you would, because we yap a lot here. Let's just say that.
I really appreciate. People should know this about me. I appreciate good, nuanced conversation. So when it's really good and nuanced, and I had something to do. I thought I was going to cut out earlier, then it got canceled. So it was all good, and I really enjoyed the conversation and wanted to stay with you through it, especially because you're here by yourself today. I know how tough it is to host the show by yourself and have to go, especially on a live show.
Oh yeah.
So no, man, I appreciated it. It's a good nuanced Mets conversation, and I think you just bring a lot of intelligence and nuance to it, and are not being over emotional. Even though as fans, we want to see the team win very badly. I know all the Mets fans in the chat and all the Mets fans watching and listening want that. All New York sports fans want that. We know this. We've grown up here. We love the pulse of the city. But I do like when you can have conversation with nuance. So I think you're doing a great job of it, man. You guys are doing a great job with the show. And, I'll be back, and I want to have you guys on with me on Straight Outta Flushing. And, thank you for having me, because this was a great conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
All right. Well, if you want to stay on for like 10 more minutes,
yes,
we do have two more. Yeah, we got two little segments here. One that's pre-recorded that I'm going to do throughout the week is that a old segment that we used to do on our pre-recorded show, and that being rapid fire stories. So these little stories that were, put out throughout the week that, we didn't put into much detail. And then we do a little bit of a closing yap session of some other stuff
Cool.
that also came out this week, and plenty to talk about, obviously, going into PSL. So here you guys go. Here are your rapid fire stories. Mets starting pitcher Tyler McGill has been transferred to the 60-day injured list as the corresponding move for free agent addition MJ Melendez. McGill is expected to miss the entirety of the 2026 season, recovering from Tommy John surgery. The Mets have claimed catcher Ben Rortvedt off waivers from the Dodgers. Rortvedt is 28 years old and has played a total of 227 career games in the majors, split across time with the Twins, Yankees, Rays, and Dodgers. As the corresponding move, right-handed pitcher Danel Nunez has been transferred to the 60-day injured list, who is expected to miss the entirety of the 2026 season, recovering from Tommy John surgery. Former Mets reliever Drew Smith has signed a minor league contract with the Washington Nationals. Smith spent 8 injury-riddled years in the Mets organization after he was acquired from Tampa in exchange for former Mets first baseman Lucas Duda back in July of 2017. The Mets have signed right-handed pitcher Bryce Conley to a minor league contract with an invite to spring training. Conley is 31 years old and a former 22nd round pick by the Athletics back in 2017. He has posted a career 4.53 earned run average across 76 starts and 84 relief appearances in 7 minor league seasons. Mets manager Carlos Mendoza reported that new starting center fielder Luis Robert Jr. will not appear in spring games right away due to a slower ramp-up. Mets trainers reportedly identified some muscles in Robert's lower body that needed to be strengthened in hopes of avoiding injury issues that he's had in the past. Robert was acquired by the Mets from the White Sox less than a month ago for infielder Luis Angel Acuna and right-handed pitcher Truman Pauly. Catcher Francisco Alvarez and infielder Jorge Polanco will also ramp up at a slow pace before participating in spring games. Mets infielder Brett Beatty has been dealing with minor discomfort in his left hamstring over the past couple of weeks and has been limited to just light infield work. Mets manager Carlos Mendoza stated that the injury is not major, but they will withhold him from outfield work for the time being. The 26-year-old Beatty was placed on the injured list during the last week of the 2025 regular season due to a right oblique strain. Mets left-handed pitcher Brandon Waddell will start tomorrow's spring opener in Port St. Lucie versus the Marlins. Waddell re-signed with the Mets on a minor league contract over the offseason following a solid stint in 2025, posting a 3.45 earned run average across 31 1/3 innings for the big league club. Former Mets outfielder Juan Lagares has announced his retirement from baseball following 10 years in the major leagues. Lagares spent 8 years in Queens and is still currently the most recent Mets player in franchise history to win a Rawlings Gold Glove back in 2014. The Mets organization has broken ground on a brand new 55,000 square foot minor league clubhouse in Port St. Lucie. While in attendance for the event, Mets president of baseball operations David Stearns announced that this was going to help cement the Mets as the preeminent player development organization in baseball. The construction of the facility is expected to be finished by spring of 2027. Tony Clark has resigned as executive director of the Major League Baseball Players Association. Clark's resignation comes in wake of the Eastern District of New York's investigation into alleged improprieties at the union. With an impending lockout expected to take place on December 1st, 2026, MLBPA litigator Bruce Meyer will serve as interim executive director for the foreseeable future. All right. So there are your rapid fire stories, but either way, some other notes. Obviously, there is one articles obviously going out. I don't know if you saw this about, and we've already talked about Cheeto Bear too much of, the way that, the media's kind of been shifting it. It's like, oh, well, he was never loved by the Mets. This was never a thing. Like, to me, I say, I mean, 7 years, 158 million were offered to you. I don't know about that. I think
That
you were loved
that sounds like
by
love
many.
to me, Carson. Sounds like a little love to me.
It does.
Yeah, that's.
Definitely.
Here's what I'll say. I will say to that. Whenever I see stories like that, and I did not see that story actually, so I don't even know who reported it. I did not see that. Whenever that comes out, go ahead. Let's make sure.
Yeah, it was by. I don't know if I've seen it. I think I had a post about it because I was going through Twitter about it. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was David Lennon of Newsday. Put it out there. Yeah.
Listen. I'll just try to take people a little bit behind journalism in a little bit. I'm not, and I'm going to be very clear. I am not saying that David Lennon's reporting is wrong. I am not saying that at all whatsoever. David Lennon is a fine reporter. What I am saying is you have to consider where that's coming from. That's all I will say. So what I mean by that is who wants to put that out and why is now the timing? Those are the questions you have to ask yourself, right? Yep. Obviously, this did not come from the Mets. Obviously. No. This is coming from the camp of the Cheeto Bear.
Yeah.
Now, this negotiations, it happens. We've watched sports for a long time. Are there probably some hurt feelings? I'm sure there are. Happens in business sometimes. I'm sure. Do I think people in the Mets didn't love Pete Alonso? No, I think that's a bunch of nonsense. I can assuredly tell you that's a bunch of nonsense. That is not true. As Carson so astutely pointed out, they were willing to give this man 7 years and $158 million before he turned it down and bet on himself for bigger payday, which I have no problem with. Yeah. Get your money.
Go ahead and do it.
Please get your money. But come on. To say they didn't show him the love, it's a bit much.
Yeah. It's one of those things. I'm like, come on. Like, I get it. There's the reports. It was like, oh, they never made him an offer. And, people will say, oh, well, Stearns didn't like him. He didn't want him. And it's like, it's just one of those things where we will find like I've already said, like we will find any excuse in our comfort zones to say why this didn't work. There are people that will talk about Francisco Lindor for political reasons as to why they got rid of this guy and they got rid of him in the clubhouse. Those people will tell you, David Stearns is the mastermind behind this, and he's trying, he's a secret Braves fan and he wants the Mets to lose. Like anybody will like those types of conspiracy theories.
Wow,
it's like that have no substance.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that I think brings in a lot of that rage towards those types of things. And I don't know if it's just the different type of Mets fan that, like, I don't know. I am the guy who, from way back from the very, very beginning, from back when we even started our show, I was someone who defended Edwin Diaz to my core after that 2019 debacle, that nightmare of a season. Because obviously I'm a big advanced stats guy. And, for me, back then at that time, there was a thought as to, maybe I'm just laying down on a grenade here, because 2019, you can say arguably, and I do believe it, he was probably the reason why they missed the postseason in 2019.
It's not crazy to say for that year. Not at all.
Not crazy at all. And it comes to a point where, he leaves for the Dodgers. I was upset with the way that the negotiations went. I thought that originally they should have offered 4 years. Personally, that's just me.
I agree.
Because he is that top tier reliever that deserves that 4-year type of extension or type of contract. However, 48 hours later, I moved on. It is what it is. Baseball's business. That's just how it is. It's one of those things where my attachment for a lot of players, I feel like it died down in my teens years. Like those are one of those things. It's like, I was attached to DeGrom. DeGrom left. Attached to David Wright. He left. Jose Reyes, I remember being very upset when he left. I was a huge
Jose Reyes fan. I was a huge,
I mean, I loved that left side of the infield, the two of them. But I mean, obviously, different situation, cheap ownership, things like that. All of those different types of factors. It's just one of those things where I feel like it's all really more in the now with a lot of sports media. It always is the recency bias of what is going on. What happened recently? What happened recently was the fact that, in certain details, they never made an offer to Pete. They never wanted him. They never wanted to keep Pete. But also, let's backtrack a little bit. I'm not saying that Pete Alonso is the bad guy in this way. But what I'm saying is, sorry, put in the swear jar. It's one of those things where, with Pete Alonso, I think, there you go, where, yes, maybe they didn't pursue him in the way that people thought that he deserved. However, they looked at it in a sustainability aspect. He's going into his 30s, and he's a first baseman. That's not a premium position. Maybe he is a premium player for that team. But like I said, with like all the home run projections, which is the department that he is top tier in, and I think we all can agree, he's a great home run hitter. He just hit one today. And, the entire roof of the Mets clubhouse just completely collapsed. But it's just one of those things where there were plenty of reasons as to why he was let go. And I understand exactly why he was let go. And like I said, I expected it with the whole Scott Boras situation. He bet on himself, and if he wants that money, he got his money. He got what he wanted. That's great. But for me, organizations like the Dodgers that you're trying to be like, they don't give that type of money to Pete Alonso. They just don't. Even if you're talking about, Freddie Freeman. Freddie Freeman is a less than one-dimensional, a way more dimensional player in comparison to Pete Alonso, who, again, not only has Pete Alonso been good for this team, however, his deficiencies have costed them games before. It's not like he's completely perfect.
Yeah.
Two things can be true. Exactly. Absolutely. And I feel like a lot of people just don't want to hear that because they see 40 home runs, 120 RBIs. That's it.
And there's a fact that he's the Mets all-time home run leader, and he just did that last year. People feel away about that. Sorry to cut you off, but yes.
No, you're 100% correct in that, and it was just one of those things where I want to win with the team that I have, and I don't. The individual accomplishments, they're great, but they're not something that I'm gonna continue to repost on Twitter or make a compilation about. It was so amazing. Like when I saw Pete Alonso pass Strawberry, I was like, okay, congratulations to him. Awesome. Let's move on. Let's actually win. It was just one of those, you get tired of it sometimes. You really do. You get tired of it, especially when you don't win. We get tired of losing. Everyone does. It was one of those things where it's like, okay, I'm getting tired of Pete Alonso airmailing throws to first base. I'm getting tired of, the limitations he has as a player. I'm not saying that he was the 100% guy at fault for them failing, which is 100% not true. But it's like, you have to see it from the eyes of the Mets. It's like, okay, Steve Cohen's got this money. Why didn't he use it? Well, it's because they didn't succeed with that money. Like, what has that money gotten you? Nothing.
And what do you think is going to get you if you are going to be sustainable in the future? I think that's my thing. I think you and I are very much on the same page with the Pete Alonso thing. In him leaving, now I'm saying his name. I looked at him as like, you have to make a decision. It's hard conversations, like you said, Carson. Hard decisions, hard truth. You had to look at him and say, if you're being honest, and you mentioned Freddie Freeman, right? He wasn't Freddie Freeman. He wasn't even Matt Olson, who replaced Freddie Freeman with the Braves. And first basemen who were more well-rounded, not one-dimensional.
Yes.
He did this one thing extremely well, an elite rate.
Mm-hmm.
I personally don't like to build. If I was building a team, it's not Pete Alonso is not actually the prototype of the first baseman that I would build a team with to win a championship. Personally,
they're going to come for you for that one. They're going to come for you.
It's fine. I'll stand on that. And it's not like again. That doesn't mean I don't think he has value.
Absolutely.
But here's what we found out. This is what free agency would always tell you.
Yeah.
And the Mets told you. At one point, he was really valuable to the Mets, and they were willing to offer him 7 years and $158 million. And he turned it down and bet on himself. And again, God bless.
Yeah.
And then the Mets got him on the deal the year before, and he opted out, as he should have, based on what he produced. And the Mets said, we're looking at where you are. We're seeing you airmail some throws. The defense is slipping. The power's there. The hitting average, it was nice in the beginning of the 2025 season, and then it dropped down. The strikeouts are still up. We're seeing that. Yeah. Should we invest all this money in a one-dimensional or more than one-dimensional first baseman? And so they said, didn't mean they didn't value Pete Alonso at all. They valued him at a certain price that they weren't willing to go beyond based on what they're trying to do to be a sustainable organization. Yep. It is fine to make those decisions. It's tough. You don't think David Stearns thought about, well, some of the fans won't like this. He just passed Darryl Strawberry, another beloved Met, a huge part of the reason I became a Met fan. And he just passed him. And maybe one day we were probably thinking about putting his number. Let me say this. Screw sentimentality.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Because you are trying to win the game. To quote the great Herm Edwards, former coach of the Jets. It's terrible to quote a Jet here, but you play to win the game. David Stearns is trying to win. He is not trying to lose. And that sounds harsh. I'm not calling Pete Alonso a loser. It's not what I'm saying. I think there's a world in which the Mets could have won with Pete Alonso. But here's the thing. They didn't. They didn't. Pete Alonso's a good player, but he's a flawed player. There's no perfect players, but he's one-dimensional. Juan Soto's not a perfect player. But you know what Juan Soto does? He gets on base at an elite rate. He can hit an elite rate. He'll give you home runs. Is he a great defensive player? No. But he's so good offensively. Like, he is one of one. Transcended offensively. He's a generational talent offensively. Pete Alonso's not that. He isn't. Some of the Mets fan base has acted like they let a generational talent walk out of the building.
I've said it. He's not a top 1% player that you go for, that full overpay of a Kyle Tucker or a Juan Soto or an Aaron Judge, a Shohei Ohtani. Like, he is a certain value. It's a certain value that he does have. He does have one prolific skill, definitely.
Absolutely.
But as you're also seeing with that prolificness, like I said, and again, projections aren't everything, 229, that's the most home runs they would have in a span of 6 years without him being
there.
It's like one of those things I talked about it even in the last episode. We had John Saponaro on here from
shout out to John.
Till Mets do his part. It was supposed to be Ibby, but Ibby was too cool, I guess, to join us.
Come on, Ibby.
No. Yeah. But we talked about it. It's like, I'd rather have, if you look at the lineup, just pure off of home runs. 30 from Lindor. We'll see what happens with the injury. Maybe that factors into it because we know that the power with that injury is something that is a factor. 30 from Lindor, 40 from Soto, 20 from the next guy, 20 from the next guy, 20 from the next guy. Like I said, you can have 20 home run threats. And I also think that there is a hitting coach that has a message, obviously, but it's better than what the Mets had in previous years, where it's in comparison to when they had Juan Soto last year, 30, 40, 40, 10, 5, 2, 2, 3. Like, it's like, I want a lineup here. Like, I need a like I already said, where one key player disappears, we don't all disappear.
Right.
You need that depth.
I completely agree. I just, maybe it'll take time. People have to see it to believe it.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I don't think Carson's out here saying that I know exactly what the lineup will be, but I just do think the lineup's more versatile. I don't think you're going to see those single-digit home run guys that you were seeing here, and I think that matters instead of putting it all on one person. The Mets have a one of one talent in Juan Soto. They have an incredible shortstop when healthy and a fantastic leader in Francisco Lindor. Bo Bichette is a really good situational hitter. We just saw this man be extremely clutch he had a fantastic World Series, and he was very good for the Blue Jays throughout the playoff run. So we've just seen this. If there's a lot of questions, you could say you got question marks. Will Francisco Alvarez, who I think needs to have a big year for him, big year for Francisco Alvarez.
Absolutely.
Will he hit in the way that you think he can? I have good vibes about it. Now, my vibes don't matter. He has to produce at the plate. I have good vibes about him this year. I think he's actually going to do well. Yeah. But if he doesn't, see, like last year when he was struggling before he got sent down and then came back and was good, it hurt the team because of what you just said. You were so reliant upon Pete Alonso's one-dimensional and Juan Soto. And when Francisco Lindor is going through a slump, you're like, oh, what are Mets going to do? There were a lot of times, and I know Mets fans felt this, and I know you felt this too, Carson. You're watching the games and you're like, man, where are these hits coming? I have no idea. Right? I have no idea.
Exactly.
And so this is not what you want. And look, I also think sometimes things happen, negotiations go through. Yes, I'm kind of saying this to the Mets fans. Sometimes you got to get over it. I too was like Carson. I did not like what went down with Edwin Diaz. I think it sucks that you let the best closer in the game, in my opinion, go to the Dodgers. It stinks. But you got to keep
I'm right there with you. That's my guy right there. But you got life goes on. Life goes on.
And you were down on him in 2019. You were down on Diaz in 2019. Right, but saw his value.
The second he gave up the infamous Kurt Suzuki home run, that's when I started to defend him the most. And people gave me shit for it. And look at us now; everybody wants to keep him. And that was one thing that I was getting a little frustrated with. It was like, oh, now everybody wants him. Now everyone wants to keep him.
Yeah,
it's like this is a guy I've been in his corner, but also still moving on. Like he's a Dodger now. Move on.
You got to, Carson.
Obviously.
You got to move on, right? And it's just look. Listen, we have a long way to go.
Absolutely.
I do think the Mets are going to be fine. I'll see more as I'm around the team at certain times this year, but I did, even when I was at the Bo Bichette presser, there's a little confidence in the organization that I see right now. In Stearns and particularly with Stearns and Mendoza, talking to both of them, and just you could just see a little bit more of the confidence in how they feel about this team, and it's shaping into where they want to go. Now, again, shaping and vision are one thing. Execution is the next step. You players have agency; they have to execute. So we'll see. But I actually think Mets fans should feel good about. I will say this: the approach of how this team is trying to be sustainable. Whether it's executed is another thing. But I do think you should feel good about the approach, and you need to understand that yesterday's baseball is not today's baseball. Yeah. And it is okay. You want a front office, and you want a manager, and you want an ownership that is willing to be malleable and flexible. What you don't want is how Carson feels about the man who is now running things for the Rangers. That's what you don't want.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not what you want right now.
And that's a whole other story. I mean, we've said that so many times on here. It's just like, and there could be points where some people just don't get what is going on, and that's perfectly fine. I understand if you don't, but that's where I'm here to help it, maybe possibly explain it. There's some things that David Stearns has done, and I'm like, well, I don't get what we're doing here, but. I'll let it play out because again, he's been efficient, the 3 times out of 10, just like the typical old school baseball fan will say. It's the same thing translated to modern day. The best hitters fail 7 times out of 10.
Right. Yep.
The best GMs fail 7 times out of 10. The best it's about trying to find that median. And I think it's all really just about, I think it more comes from the root of a lot of people saying, well, this guy thinks he's the smartest guy in the room. He thinks he's the smartest guy in the room, and he thinks he's completely perfect. Well, give me perfect. That's not how that works.
Smart.
It's just more of an advanced thinking of the efficiency that you saw back in when back when someone said, and that's how that's another conversation that we don't have time for, of people who bash analytics because they have no idea what they're looking at.
Yeah.
It's one of those things. It's like, it's the same efficiency approach, just in more of an advanced way of thinking. And I think that that's one thing that a lot of people forget. It's just more of, the view of, well, I'm not using the GPS technology. Like if you open, it's not hard to understand, but if you don't want to make the effort to understand it,
right, then you won't.
It's whatever.
Then you just won't. And last thing I'll say here is, David Stearns, I do think, is an intelligent man, but being the smartest person in the room is what you just said, Carson. It's not about being perfect. Smart people know this. Smart people understand when to cut their losses. They understand to admit when they've had a mistake. They also understand when something is not working. And they say, how do I fix this and get better? That's what smart people do. People who are not smart, they double down on those mistakes. They say, throw more money at that. Let's run it back again because that'll do it. Those are not smart moves. I think you should look at David Stearns
like him,
not just
him.
Judge him for there and say, hey, you know what? I'm willing to make some changes here. Takes a strong and smart person to make some changes. Easy way out, as I said multiple times in the show, is to run it back and do the same thing. That's the easy way.
Easily. Either way, I think we're going to wrap it up here. Obviously, we went way past the 2-hour threshold, but Dexter, thanks for coming on. Obviously. Good, either way, thank you guys so much for watching. For those of you who watched it live, if you're watching on playback, hope you enjoyed the conversation. Make sure to follow Dexter. His links are all in the description. And of course, for those of you watching or listening on playback, you want to join the conversation live in the future, make sure to subscribe to the Mets Weekly YouTube channel. Turn on those post notifications to not miss when we do go live, which is 7:30 every Friday. And make sure to follow Mets Weekly on X and on TikTok. Follow all of us individually, including my co-hosts who are not here today and in Port St. Lucie. I hope that they're having a good time there. And if they see each other, they shake hands like good friends do.
So.
Either way, we will, I guess we'll send you out to Port St. Lucie tomorrow for 1 o'clock start. Brandon Waddell on the mound against the Marlins. Glad to have baseball back. And of course, let's go Mets. And we will see you guys next time.
Let's go Mets.